Hi, everyone. Welcome to TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, November 9th. Well, it's been a crazy week, or it was a crazy week last week here in the U.S. with the election day and subsequent days of counting afterwards. But no matter who you supported, I think now's the time for Americans to gather around and do what we do best, right? Try to make our country better. Congratulations to the winners. Condolences to the losers of the election, but we as a country need to move on, up and out. We have this pandemic we're dealing with. The numbers are horrendous, with 100,000 plus a day new cases, and we need to focus. We need to focus on fixing a lot of this. Anyway, we're going to do our part here at TechStrong TV, as we always do, by trying to provide you with great information, news, analysis, interviews on what's going on around DevOps, digital transformation, cloud native, and of course, cybersecurity. We have a great show lined up for you today. Let me tell you what we've got. First, I'm really happy to interview a female CEO co-founder, Diane Strutner. Diane grew up in the Silicon Valley area, went to school in New York, then off to Europe for 6 years where she lived there, and got involved in video metrics and video streaming metrics. Started a company called DataZoom, which is helping some of the biggest companies in the world. And it helps all video streaming content providers by giving them better insight into the delivery metrics of their content, more than just the demographics you would get in a YouTube or even Vimeo or something like that. That's about end users. It's a really good interview. I think you're going to enjoy meeting Diane. She's a bright young lady, and really this DataZoom seems to be doing a great job. Next up, I've got a great DevOps Unbound episode. This is episode 6, not of our roundtable, but of our panel discussions for DevOps Unbound, which of course is sponsored by our friends at Tricentis, and thank you to them for that. This panel is on DevOps at the C-level. It's a great discussion on how to lead a DevOps transformation, how to interact with your other C-level peers about DevOps transformation, as well as with your team, picking tools, changing culture, etc. Good, really good panel. I think you're going to enjoy it. After that, we're going to go to something old. It's not that old, just from last month, from our DevOps Experience, our 3rd annual DevOps Experience event. And this is a discussion that was between KK Kosakai, KK, of course, founder of Jenkins, and Brian Dawson of CloudBees. And obviously, Brian knows KK from KK's time at CloudBees. In any event, Jenkins is coming up on 10 years. And Brian and KK have a great discussion on what these 10 years have been like. What's the 10 years, what do we look like going forward? How has this all helped with the emergence of DevOps, pipelines, and everything else? Great discussion with KK and Brian. I think you want to really catch that one. After that, we're going to go over to our Chief Content Officer and Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, where Charlene will be discussing the news, headlines around the sites today at MediaOps, as well as a great interview with Grant Miller, CEO and co-founder of Replicated. And then Charlene also has a good preview of what promises to be a bang-up week of webinars here on MediaOps. You don't want to miss that. After that, Charlene has yet another interview, so a double dose of Charlene today. And this is with Vinay Shanara, CTO of Babex. I believe it's called Babex. After that, I'll be back to introduce Mitch over at the Analyst Corner. Mitchell's guest today is Jason McGee, my friend Jason McGee, VP and CTO, IBM Cloud Platform. And Jason happens to be an IBM fellow as well. And they're going to talk about IBM's recent announcement about IBM and AT&T teaming up to help enterprises manage their applications hosted in hybrid cloud environments. So good stuff there. Mitchell, I'm sure, will have some good commentary on it. And Actually, Mitchell has another video as well. Cloud Truth CEO Greg Annett and CTO Matt Conway join Mitch to discuss their research into managing the complexity of configuration management across multiple clouds. Some good DevOps there for you. Then I'll be back to wrap things up. We've got about 2.5, almost 3 hours worth of great TechStrong TV for you today. We're going to take a quick commercial break and come right back with our first guest. So DataZoom's an interesting company. It gives video content creators insight into really what is the delivery metrics behind their video. How many people are being buffered? What's the bandwidth they're using to view devices, etc. Much more than the kind of perfunctory stuff you get on, let's say, a YouTube or even Vimeo or something like that. Diane's an interesting study as well. She's a female entrepreneur, co-founder, born in Silicon Valley, lived abroad for a number of years, and now has DataZoom back in Silicon Valley and doing some big things with some big companies. I think you're really going to like meeting Diane and hearing her story, as well as how DataZoom is helping so many companies. Let's now go to our interview with Diane. Hi, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel, and thanks for joining us on another segment of TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Diane Strutner, right? Diane? Yes? Fantastic. Diane is the CEO, founder of a company called DataZoom. Hey, Diane, thanks for joining TechStrong TV.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Pleasure. So, Diane, it's not that I think. I know we haven't interviewed you or featured DataZoom on our show before, so I think that's probably the place to start. Why don't you give our audience a little background on DataZoom and maybe about your own background and how you came to found it?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a California girl, born and raised, grew up in Silicon Valley, and saw my parents both working in tech growing up and really thought that was the place for me. So I really envisioned that from the start. I went out to school in New York, moved to Europe for 6 years, and that's where I actually got my foothold into the video industry, coming from the analytics side, and started DataZoom 4 years ago in February, which is really exciting, and really trying to help companies really take advantage of data in the space.
Fantastic. So did you move back to Silicon Valley? Are you in Europe? What's the story?
Great question. I've been hopping around a little bit from place to place. But yeah, I actually relocated to Southern California, DataZoom. We were lucky in the fact that we've been all remote from day one. So we have employees and developed over the world on our platform, which is really exciting. And we've, had 4 years of experience now working remotely. So it's been less of a transition for us. Everything that's happened since February, March, but it's also been a really exciting time for the video streaming space. So it's been good.
It certainly has. We're here as living proof of that, right? It has been. So I want to make sure our audience really understands. So we got your background now, and what is the service that DataZoom provides to its customers?
Yeah, so we've created a new category of software with DataZoom called the Video Data Platform. And we're a cloud-based SaaS platform that helps content distributors to capture, standardize, and then leverage the data that's created by the end-to-end process of video delivery. It's used to help empower observability and optimization strategies that ultimately help to grow the efficiency and profitability of the streaming space. So we're all about, the bits and bytes of data, and how we can put them into action to actually help make the streaming space more efficient and more profitable.
Fantastic. Now, when we look at streaming, of course, there's the streaming apps, right? And then there's the YouTubes of the world. I mean, quite frankly, one of the things I've seen here at MediaOps and what we do at TechStrong TV and our Digital Anarchist platform is we don't put our stuff on YouTube because we don't get a lot of that data. And we don't even own the rights to some of the use of the video, let alone the analytics and data. You're at the kind of mercy of Google and what they give you.
Yes.
So where do you have to be on a special platform? Does DataZoom have its own platform, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So, I think at a really high level, what makes the streaming space powerful is kind of freedom and flexibility. So at the end of the day, we want any user to be able to watch our content on any type of device, at any time, at any place. We want to provide them excellent quality. And of course, as people in the video business, we want to retain as much of that value as possible. So what the big five have, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, Google, is this really unparalleled infrastructure that they've all built in-house that helps them to deliver video efficiently and effectively to meet all of those requirements. If you're not one of those big five, you're having to contract a ton of different third-party services to make that possible. Everything from how you're preparing and capturing your content to how it actually gets delivered, the software to play it out across any device at any time at great resolution. And to add even more, salt to the wound, the medium of which we've chose to deliver this content, it's not the consistent cable connection we used to get. It's this medium of the internet, which is completely dynamic. The availabilities and throughputs are changing at all times. So it really makes the need to have control and orchestration over this end-to-end system greater than ever before. And I think what we've seen is that, like yourselves, companies want to be able to control the experience. They want to be able to understand their audiences. They want to be able to understand how to maximize efficiency and profits, either through their subscription models or through their advertising models. And there's no really way to do that if you're giving everything up to one of these big five and essentially also giving all of your data and audience and whatnot content to them directly. So there's huge motivations to have your own end-to-end system stood up, but we're going to be doing it by leveraging all of these third-party systems. And the challenge is really that from the way that these big five have built an efficient platform is they've been able to adapt and understand and observe and control this end-to-end environment. And the way they do that is through data. And the challenge that our industry faces is that today our data is siloed. We have player data going one place, we have CDN logs going another place, we have encoding data going to another place. It's not standardized, so at a really granular level, when you hit play from an iOS device in an iOS player versus play on your Roku TV, for example, that data point in the JSON structure is unstandardized. So we're not even able to understand very succinctly the data that we do have. And then finally, the challenge is, in an end-to-end system, we need to be able to connect the dots. What happened upstream that had negative effect downstream, or where was there an opportunity I could have leveraged that I did not do that in? And so being able to tie this data together through tracing and synchronicity is really important. And foundationally, what this means is that the industry has been lacking a solid data foundation from day one. We've built all these services in silos, not really thinking about, the one day when we'll want to make it more efficient, the one day when we'll want to make it more profitable. And now companies are facing this dilemma of how can I squeeze the rock to make more profitability out of the service that I'm providing to end users, whether it be revenue that's generated through subscriptions or through ad-supported content. And the only way we're going to get there is by improving the data that we have today. So foundationally, it's basically what we're all about here at DataZoom. We help provide a platform, and we're building towards this, that will capture data from across this end-to-end process and all of these different systems that we're using and are interchangeable, and allow someone to plug and play whatever system they want, but maintain the ability to understand their systems, control it, optimize it, and thus ultimately lead to greater profit and profitability.
Excellent. I love it. I'm listening to you and I'm human, right? Thinking about, well, what does this mean to me? And, in our circumstance. And look, we frankly deal with that here at MediaOps, right? We're recording this on a Zoom, but it's going to get edited by my in-house team here. We then upload that. Well, we then amalgamate a bunch of these interviews into one TechStrong TV episode,
right,
which then gets uploaded. And it gets uploaded. We use a Vimeo backend, for instance, right? And via that, it allows us to syndicate, I guess is the word I use. I don't know if it's the right word, but we syndicate it to Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. So we'll stream it on YouTube, but we don't keep the recordings up there. And then we also have a mobile app. And so not streamed, we have to upload it via an RSS site thing to a mobile app. And at the same time, we have OTT apps for Roku and Amazon and Apple. And we, same kind of similar type of RSS, or whatever the RSS format is for that, to reach those channels. But they're not, they're very distinct from what we do, let's say, on the regular websites, right? On a computer connection, though they're all living in Vimeo, right? The back end is that's where the video is, and so we don't have. Vimeo does give you some analytics on views and location, but again, not the real data maybe that you'd want of everything you'd want, and so yeah. I could see that problem, or I could see the issues you're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Vimeo is a video platform, and there are a number of video platforms out there, and it's interesting. So the data that you're getting is probably mostly data about the front end performance, how many users have watched something.
Yes, that's all it is.
For. But what they're not likely providing is things like, what was the average bit rate that your users consume this content? How long did it take for the videos to start playing back? Was there any instances of buffering during this playback experience? And when you are, the Disneys and the Warner Medias and the Peacock and the Hulus and the Netflix and all of these,
it's important.
Major, it's really, the user experience is more critical than ever. As users, we have very low tolerances for failure. It depends often on the type of content you're watching and when you're watching and where you're watching, which again leads to part of the optimization challenge, right? Where do you set your thresholds? But what Vimeo is providing behind the scenes is a backend. They've contracted with a CDN who's contracted with transit providers who are peering off to ISPs. On the front end, they're providing certain coding and transcoding and patching services so that your content can be shown across all these platforms. So the data trail that's actually created by just using a platform like Vimeo, although it's not exposed to you as a user of that platform, but internally, it's like vast amounts of data. And what we find is that if you call up someone's like an OTT provider's customer support platform, they may not know that you're even having a problem. They almost certainly do not know why. And the stories we have from our customers who are, in this streaming space, and they're customers of all sizes, are that it can take sometimes hours. Imagine being in live streaming and it taking hours to identify why something went wrong. That's the reality we face today. If you call up your internet provider and you say, hey, I'm having a problem, watching this content, they also, on the other end, are not able to definitively tell you, was it us or was it them, right? So across this end-to-end system, what makes video, complicated is that you have a lot of processes, and the route from start to end is almost never the same. And so we really need great data to measure and trace between, and thus understand what's actually happening when streaming is taking place. And I know we've talked a lot about, things on the kind of operational side so far, but an area that I see really interesting and a lot of growth is on the advertising side, right? So with this pandemic, we've seen a lot of people watching connected TV content. And it's funny, I read a study recently and it said that basically people were more likely to recommend to a friend and research and basically like have more conversion and interaction with a brand they saw over connected television than over linear television, traditional television. However, the advertising budgets are still smaller. It's interesting, right? And part of this is because you have, once we get to the internet, we now have a lot of opportunity for fraud, which is the challenge. But also we have a lot of different ways that the advertiser is trying to actually access that opportunity to show you their content. And the publishers are, using a lot of different methodologies to insert these ads, right? So there's challenges with maintaining the same type of measurement that we used to get from linear. And this is what I think is happening is that advertisers and agencies are so used to what they used to get from linear television, they're having a hard time using new measurement and, ability verification type services that are necessary to, really budgeting and buying for ad space on the OTT side. But it's an area that I think will see a lot of growth and change heading into 2021.
Agreed. Excellent stuff. So Diane, you guys recently released some news.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yes. So we, in our journey to capture, standardize, and deliver video data, we started with data from the video players. So we have over 30 different players that we can collect data from today. We've now expanded that into a CDN log delivery. So we're the first to market with a CDN log reception and standardization and delivery platform, which means that independent of the CDN that you're using, we can capture the logs, real-time logs from that platform, standardize them into a single structure so we can interpret them more easily across multiple CDNs, and then send that data off to your analytics system. And what's really exciting is that, this is really some of the first foray into real-time root cause analysis for the streaming space. Coupled with our player data, you can now actually tie together individual chunks from a CDN with the player KPIs and attributes that the end user experienced to say, oh, and in time synchronization, when buffering increased, so did, for example, my cache miss ratio, right? So for the first time, we can actually start to diagnose challenges in real time. CDN is often the scapegoat for all problems. So it'll be really interesting to see how companies adapt to having more data and being able to make more impactful changes with this additional insight.
That's great. So this would work across like an Akamai or any of the large CDNs out there?
Yeah, currently we're
Cloudflare.
supporting Fastly and Lumen, who's the rebranded CenturyLink. We're going to be adding 2 more this year, some of the ones that you mentioned. Yeah, so our goal is
cool.
at least 6. Yeah, thank you.
This is great. You know what we didn't tell people? Where can they get more information?
Yeah, you can go to our website, datazoom.io, and would love to have you guys sign up for a time for us to chat and take you through our platform some more.
And that's data, D-A-T-A, Zoom, Z-O-O-M, .com.
Yeah, .io.
.io.
Yeah.
Got it. Diane, thanks so much for joining. us today and explaining this to us. Look, I don't know how, as someone who's very involved in video these days, this is all fascinating to me. And I think, to our audience out there too, I was just reading an article actually about how important video has become to technology vendors, right?
Yeah.
In getting the word out and reaching audiences. We're not at in-person conferences where we can meet face to face and I can, give you a briefing or something. So, being able to do it with video is kind of the way it's going.
It's an exciting time. We see other sectors who we probably never fully envisioned seeing video as part of their core offering, like the telemedicine space, education, right? Now having video
Absolutely.
core of their ability to deliver their products and services. So, for us, we're excited to see how we can play a part in those industries as well, beyond just the entertainment space where we play today.
Very cool. Diane, come back and join us again sometime and give us an update. And we can continue this discussion. Fantastic. Hey, Diane Strutner, CEO, founder at DataZoom, video analytics for everyone. If you're missing out on that data, you're missing out. Diane, be well. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right. Next up, we've got episode of DevOps Unbound. It's DevOps at the C-level. Features Mark Suttle, who's a multiple-time C-level CIO, as well as a consultant at the C-level for many large enterprises. Louise McCarthy, who I had the pleasure actually of meeting in Iceland about 2 years ago at an Insight Ignite event by my friend Emmett Keith. And Louise has also presented and she presented at Insight Ignite, but she's been engaged as a consultant with several large digital transformation engagements with some of the largest banks in the world. And then certainly last but not least, we're joined by, I'm drawing a blank, Mitch Ashley, of course, my co-host is on there. And then last but not least, from DevOps Institute, VP of Research, Eveline Oehrlich, who's also formerly at Forrester, and knows a thing or two about digital transformation herself. She's the principal researcher and author behind the Skill Up report every year, the annual report from DevOps Institute. So here is episode 6 of DevOps Unbound. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of DevOps Unbound. DevOps Unbound is brought to us by our friends at Tricentis. So thanks for their sponsorship. But, they sponsor, but we pick the topics, we pick the guests, and we have a lot of fun here talking about relevant topics around DevOps. Today's topic centers around DevOps and digital transformation at the C-level. And let me introduce you to our panel. First of all, we have Louise McCarthy. And Louise, I'm going to ask you to kind of introduce yourself, a little background for our audience.
Yes, thank you, Alan. And hi, everybody. I'm Louise McCarthy. My background more recently is doing large, complex digital transformations, mainly for the financial services. So mainly through the eyes of the business. rather than the technology, although I have held roles as CFO and I've held roles COO and CIO as well.
Excellent. Next, we have Mark Settle. Mark, welcome.
So I am a 7-time CIO, and I most recently left Okta about a year ago and have been advising startup companies since then. I'm based here in Silicon Valley, and probably my encounters with DevOps are focused on supporting DevOps teams in terms of infrastructure requirements that they have, and also introducing the concept into actually business application support within a conventional kind of an IT group.
Thank you and welcome. And then Eveline Oehrlich. Eveline, please.
Yes, hello there. Eveline Oehrlich. I'm the Chief Research Director at the DevOps Institute. Before that, I spent 13 years as Vice President at Forrester Research, studying a variety of topics, and DevOps, of course, was one of them, working with many enterprises and C-levels and others to explore the challenges and the fun of DevOps.
Very good. Never heard anyone talk about the fun of DevOps, but I'm looking forward to discussing that. And then last but not least, of course, is my co-host here on DevOps Unbound, Mitch Ashley of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell.
Great. Good to be here. I'm Mitch Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies. We focus on digital transformation, DevOps, cloud native, and cybersecurity. I'm also a former CIO, not nearly as experienced as Mark is, but have led transformations and also implementation of DevOps, as well as been a CTO, CEO of product companies. So I've lived on both sides of DevOps.
Great. What a great panel we have today. I'm really looking forward to it. So we're talking about DevOps at the C-level. As I mentioned to you all before we started today's show, you know, our friend Gary Groover wrote a book, Leading the Transformation. He wrote several books. One of them was Leading the Transformation. And Gary is a big proponent of what he calls the top-down approach to DevOps and digital transformation. And in Gary's view, and I'm not saying right or wrong, in Gary's view, you cannot have a successful digital transformation or DevOps transformation without, excuse me, sponsorship, support, air cover, if you will, from the C-level, including the CIO or CTO, depending on the organization, CEO, etc. Let's start there. Is C-level support absolutely, positively required to have a successful transformation? Anybody?
Do you mind if I go first, Alan?
Sure.
I mean, I would actually see my recent transfer. I've done about 5 or 6 transformations and tried all sorts of ways to actually get them going. There's always blockers on the way, and it's usually the blockers that slows the whole problem down. And the blockers either come from the ground up, from the employees or the people that run the processes today, or you get the blockers in terms of the C-level suite people who tend to want to own things, and it's a bit of ego that actually blocks things going that way. And the most recent transformation was successfully owned by the C-suite. So they drove it, they owned it, they were the stakeholders. But most of the engagement actually came from the employees, from the process owners. So we ran the whole transformation from the process owners actually owning and identifying where the transformation needs to take place. And that really made it hugely successful because you didn't have people feeling for their own jobs. Because with digital transformation, it always means, or often means, that there's going to be that unfortunately are lost in various areas of the transformation, but mainly doing transactional type work. But if it's a transactional people that are running the processes, they highlight their pain points, and then we work with them to actually change those pain points into something positive. So I would arguably say both from top down, but also if you don't do it with engagement of the people running the processes today, it won't work.
So I'll chime in. You know, I think I have the same answer and stated in a slightly different way. I think the way the question gets asked, it sounds as if, you know, the CTO or the CIO is going to come down from the mountain with the DevOps tablets and then mass the employees and team members. You know, yea and verily, you know, I've been converted and now it's your turn. Like, we're all going to go do this together. most of the time that doesn't work. I mean, for one person to come in, well, take an example where a startup company here that's been reasonably successful, maybe they get up to a product team of, I don't know, engineering team of 500 people or something like that. They hire a new chief product officer or a chief technology officer who says, we're going to do this completely different. I have a vision, etc. Well, they're going to do it, but that's going to be a slog to kind of get there. But what I have seen be more successful is almost like, what's the right term in a battle when you send the beach guy out, the beach master, right? That's like moving people around. So you really want like almost like a fifth column movement down at the grassroots level of people who are genuinely interested in exploring these new ways of doing business. And then I think what the C-level person adds are the methodological resources to drive scale. And so many DevOps initiatives fail because they sound interesting, they sound contemporary. People think, well, other people do it, so it must be beneficial. But then after like 18 months, everybody scratches their head. Where are the benefits? Like, we thought this was going to be transformational. That's not. I mean, the technical people are having fun. They've developed this new terminology, et cetera. And if you scratch below the surface, well, guess what? You're doing DevOps in like 5 different ways because the little seed groups have all picked the tool they wanted and, decided that they're going to have a daily scrum twice a week or, whatever. They've got their own little process set up. And then people say, like, where's the benefit? Like, this was supposed to be transformational. So at some point in the early stage of the journey, it's needed to drive scale and that level of endorsement. But I think it can almost backfire if it's launched like from the brain of Mark Settle that this, yea and verily, I want to lead you to the promised land.
Sort of a Charlton Heston beard I'm picturing on you there, Mark. Eveline, how about you?
Yeah, I actually would say it should be outcome-driven DevOps. It doesn't really matter if it is from the C-level, from the individual, from the inside out, from the outside in, from the top to the bottom to the top, from the middle to the whatever. It needs to be it needs to be outcome-driven. What I mean by that is only metrics will make us change. Just like I drive through my town here, this is a little analogy. I drive through my town here, they installed one of those things where they measure the speed, and if you go over 50 km/h, you get a ticket. Well, my husband, even so that thing has been there for 2 years, my husband manages to get a ticket every 3 months. But what he does is he intercepts the mail, and then he doesn't tell me that he has gotten that ticket. So now what I have done to stop those 15 euro tickets every 2 months, because if you add it up, you can go for a nice dinner. I am going to go to the mail before he gets home, so I see how many tickets he gets, and he gets little little lines, and that metric is on the refrigerator. I should have brought a picture of it. And that has actually reduced how he is driving through town. And so if you go back to the DevOps teams and the digital transformation, and you ask the individuals at C-level or VP level or practitioner level, how successful have you been, or what's the challenges around? It's easy to point to somebody, but if you have data, which shows where you are, and it maps to where you want to go, and you share that amongst all these different individuals, there is no argument. It's not the guy with the long beard, as Mark would come in, or it is not somebody at the lowest level who could argue with that. We could huddle around it and figure it out. What do we need to do? So I think it's not really about who. Of course, we do need some individuals who pays for it. We need some kind of a fund and budget and all of that. But I really think it's outcome driven rather than organizational level driven.
Can I just chime in on that one too? So I would agree 100%. And outside of maybe the CTO or CPO or IT organization, bringing evidence of improved sophistication, operational metrics around the process to almost any other C-level executive, I hate to say, they don't really care. It doesn't. The CFO, if you show that, I don't know, the Jira throughput, the story, whatever, it's like I in one of my books, it's like reading a Bible to the cat. You know, the cat will look at you and feign interest, but have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And that's sort of, once you get outside the technical functions, everybody, that's your job. Like, you know, that's the way, you know, you figure out the way work needs to get done. And again, to your point, it's more of a business outcome. You know, like, are we actually getting customer request enhancements through in greater quantity? Were we able to respond to a competitor's new feature set faster than we did at their last release cycle, or, you know, whatever those things are? That's what people want to talk about. Exactly.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, the outcomes is aligned to the strategy of the organization. So you've got to be doing a transformation for a reason. And there's usually 3 or 4 reasons why you're doing a transformation. It's around the customer journey. So the customer needs to improve the satisfaction. You've got to cut your costs. You're trying to grow your revenue. And then the one that's usually an outliner that's becoming up running at the moment is carbon emissions. So for every one of these pain points that I mentioned earlier, there should be a business case that shows measurement of success against each of those 4 measures. And that's what you bottom up, you report the top level to the C-suite to say, this is why we're doing it. This is the measure of success of what we're doing it. And even breaking some of the pain points and the business cases down to quick wins. So ones that you can be getting on with relatively quickly that free up cash that then can pay for the more strategic type things.
Yeah. So I think this brings up, all 3 of you have touched on it, and it brings up what I think is really sort of an entry question, right? Which is it's the genesis of digital transformation. Why and how does any organization decide to go through the potential pain, heartache, and change of digitally transforming, of adopting DevOps or Agile? Louise, I'm pretty sure we spoke about this. Was it at an Emmett Keefe Insight Ignite in Iceland?
Yes,
that you were at?
Yes.
I was there with you, and I remember talking to you about this.
Yeah.
You know, Eveline, in your day, you know, someone like Mark might go to a Forrester conference and come back and say, you know, wow, Eveline Oehrlich from Forrester just presented this presentation study on the benefits of digital transformation and DevOps adoption. And God darn it, she described us to the T. We really need to do that here. And maybe that worked then, right? 7 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't know if that's the genesis of digital transformation today. I think a lot of time digital transformation today does start with technical champions lower down, whispering in Mark's ear, man, we could, you know, if we were doing DevOps or Agile or whatever, you know, we could really change, we could really make better customer experiences. We can give customers what they want. We could do it better, cheaper, faster.
You know, Alan, I think we have a chasm that we have to cross, and that is DevOps can be sort of a vanity project for the IT or the development organization, right? It can be a purely self-interest. You know, we're doing what we do better, which is, you know, always a good thing. But and at the end of the day, does it move the needle for the business? You have to be able to translate that into what Eveline, I think, said was the why. Louise also said the why. But what is the real benefit we're trying to get out of it? When you have a purpose for doing it, now you have metrics you can put around that. Is it revenue? Is it competitiveness? Is it responsiveness to the market? Is it changing customer expectations and behaviors? What is it? That's truly then the development of the IT organization knows that they're making a difference. Otherwise, how do you know whether you should be working on more releases per hour, per day, or you should be working on just fixing the backlog? How do you know? You don't, other than just sort of your own internal metrics. And I guess it kind of reminds me of that phrase of the, was it belly button gazing, right? You're sort of looking at yourself and what you think's important. But I think that connection, you have to cross that chasm, whether the business is coming to you or you have an idea of what we can do better and how it might help. And let's then make that connection.
But that's my point. Like someone like Mark, what does it take to push you over the edge and say, God darn it, we got to do this?
That's a good.
We're committed.
Just let me tackle that one in a second. One thing that's funny about this whole line of conversation is, of course, in the world that I live in out here, people, there's no question about doing it. It's like, who is the most
A given
or more sophisticated? So in the war for talent, that same 500-person organization I referenced, they might look at each other and say, like, who do we know at Google or Facebook, in their engineering group? Like, we've got to, we know we should be doing this better. We've kind of played around with the concept. We've hired some lower level people who said, like, you guys are just, behind the times here. So we need some real leadership in this area. So anyway, that's the other side of the coin, and in parts of the country where maybe it's like an accepted practice, there's almost a competition to be the most sophisticated or get the most benefit. But the spark plug, the question you've asked, I'm thinking about some second tier markets, and I really hate to call out, specific locales, but what the hell, as a consultant, you can talk like that. So,
Sure.
if you're like in a place like St. Louis and you're in an organization that just has done the business the same way forever, all the IT management, all the technical management has come up through the ranks, kind of doing things the old fashioned way, quarterly releases, and they don't keep the same kind of metrics that you would in a DevOps environment. To blow a place like that up, there'd have to be some kind of a competitive imperative, or the white knight does show up from time to time, right? So if you think about it, sometimes when the new CPO or the CTO comes in, and I've experienced this in my own career, there'll be a cause or an initiative that I've promoted during my entire tenure. The new guy or gal comes in and they get it done like in a year. And I think, like, what the heck happened here? There was one company where I was trying to get them off of Microsoft Dynamics and get them onto Salesforce. There's another company I was trying to get production systems up into the cloud. And we did every kind of seed activity you can imagine. We sent the cloud one, we sent people up to Redmond for some AWS instruction. We did some prototyping, et cetera. New CIO comes in and says, we're going to the cloud. 12 months later, like half the production systems are in the cloud. How did that happen? So sometimes the change at the top, which gets us back to where this kind of started, maybe that is the seminal spark plug. And especially if that person's been brought in because there's a broader C-level recognition that we're not keeping up with the times. We need to make some kind of change. So you have that broader support. When people start to whine, they know that the whining's not going to get them out of the change that's about to come. But for just self-generated change for people that have, then I go back to, Mitch, what you said, then you can always have a vanity project, which is, you can point to as evolutionary. Like, we've got a small group, they're putting their toe in the water, they're doing some interesting things. So we are keeping up with the times, but then you just don't get the scale benefits, at the end of the day.
I think there is, to add to something, to what Mark said, as the ecosystem of our organizations has expanded, right? We have, just think of the travel industry doesn't exist at this point in time, but think of maybe manufacturing, right? In the area where I'm in Stuttgart, we have large car manufacturers, and they're connected to Bosch and others, and the ecosystem is rather broad. And these folks at all levels are collaborating, connecting, not as much now with where we are, but they have exchanged thoughts and ideas, they go to events, and they learn from each other at all the different levels. And so I think there is that, as Mark said, to some extent, there is this not really a competition, but the exchange of ideas, which has brought additional adoption of DevOps at all levels, right? So if I am the C-level of Bosch and I go to a autonomic car driving event and I meet the CF C-level of the CF industry down in Friedrichshafen, and they're telling me about, wow, we really improved our reliability scores, and we have really punched up our cadence around the product X, Y, and Z. I go back and I say to my team, hey, I just met this team over there. They're doing something fantastic. Can we start? It's that spark, which to some extent happens to cross over in this ecosystem as we start to be much more connected and dependent. I think that's one point. The other one is, if you look at the individuals who are today in IT, they don't look like this anymore. I'm a COBOL, Pascal, HP 3000 JCL person. That's when I grew up. That's my heritage in operations. The guys and the girls today in these teams, they are completely different. They are, they want Python. They want to do sexy things. They want to do fun things. They want to show what they can do, and they're looking for inspirations from their leaders as well. And they want to see that they can make a difference. I think that is also, from a cultural perspective, I think, of course it's important, but I think that's also a driving force. And that's not just the individual contributors, but also the consultants and the C-levels who are, I call them the flip-flop wearing chino looking guys who go to the conferences, right? Mitch, we've seen them, and I'm like, oh, I think I'm overdressed with my suit. That's the people who actually make DevOps happen, and they want to have fun. They want to do things. They don't want to do JCL and things like I did in a boring ops group, dying of boredom.
I think you're talking about a couple of things, Eveline. One is the attracting talent, right? If the people have more selection, economic conditions aside, more selectivity about the kind of work that they want to do, the companies that they want to work for. There's also just, how do you learn to develop software? If DevOps is what you're coming into, a way of developing software, you're looking for organizations and you expect that approach. So I think your point is right on. It's also the audience of the people who are going to be the adopters or the embracers or the champions of doing this. So that all makes a big difference. The command from on high, as Mark was talking about, the tablets, there's an expression for that. This too shall pass, right? That's the reaction usually of those kinds of initiatives. You have to have adoption. And I think you spoke to that really well.
So I tell you, look, if you're a Silicon Valley cool kid, or you work at one of these organizations where flip-flops and jeans are the rule, and then you do the hair thing and all of that. I don't do that so well anymore. That's cool. But Louise, you've done transformations at what we may think of as large, stodgy financial organizations, right? And they're not Silicon Valley based, and they're not a jeans and flip-flop culture. So how does it play there?
Well, actually, funny you were talking about flip-flops, high fives and cappuccino. I worked in government actually for a little while in the tax authority, and that was a time when the government was setting up its global digital authority, and everybody in the government, all of a sudden, they changed from suits to wearing flip-flops and high fives and cappuccinos, and it was like a world away from the starchy government. But anyway, moving on to the financial services. Yeah, I mean, financial services, I've been lucky enough actually to do transformation in some legacy financial services. I mean, the big boys like the HSBCs, for example, which is complex. It's like turning the Titanic around. And I've often written articles around, it's like moving deck chairs around. The reason why I say that is because automation is the way forward. We talk about automation in many guises. Automation takes out people, it takes out transactional type activities. But the legacy banks are just struggle to do it. So I say it's like moving the deck chairs around Titanic because of the legacy systems they've got. Transformation, they talk about it, they move things around, but nothing real and concrete actually comes out of the transformation, which is really sad because, there's great opportunities there in the legacy banks. And on the other side of the fence, I'm working currently with a contender bank, a digital bank, which is new, it's fresh, it's green. It's almost as green as your screen there, Alan. It's a greenfield site, and it's great to be able to take the whole end-to-end customer journey and see it digitalized, and how quickly you can change and transform and developing and changing technology with that suite that's end to end. It's just awesome to be able to see how quickly it happens whereas the legacy banks are still thinking about planning it, talking about it, cogitating over it, when the small guys are out with the new technology. And one of the things that I'm often transforming whenever I do my transformation, it's not transformation is for Christmas, it's for life in my mindset. So it's around continuously thinking about the innovation, and it's about encouraging these legacy banks to have innovation departments that are constantly thinking about the new technology that's out there to take them ahead of their competitors. So like these digital banks, you know, if the legacy banks are doing this, but actually seeing a way of making it happen quickly. And I think that's the problem that they're constantly battling, with the bureaucratic slowness of moving Titanic.
Yeah.
So clearly the kind of organization you're at determines or will have a huge impact on this. Guys, we're coming on the backside of our time limit here. I wanted to talk a little bit about, okay, we've made the decision. We are moving forward with our transformation. We are adopting DevOps and Agile and you know, these new ways. How at the C-level do we, short of coming down from the mountain with the 2 tablets in God's own writing, how do we, you know, translate that to the troops? How do we affect the organization that, you know, this isn't some passing fancy of the CIO and it's not going to pass, you know, in the next quarter. This is really the way we're doing it. How do you make that change, you know, down the ranks, get people adopting as champions and being successful with it? Mark?
You know, it's not unlike an initiative around security. When you talk about cultural change within an organization, you know, I think leaders don't always appreciate what a huge impact they have on the people that they lead. You know, people take cues from the way you use your time, the things that you show interest in, things you follow up on. Yeah, I mean, your time management sends tons of signals to the organization. And some of the operational metrics that I poo-pooed before as being of no interest whatsoever to people outside the technical areas, you know, are a great way to kind of keep score. You go back to what Eveline said. So if there's a sense like we're making progress, and some of those celebrations can be really important. I'll just leave you with a thought. I mean, I worked with a guy several years ago who used to say, he said, "What interests my boss fascinates me." And, you know, as long as there's some sustained interest, and to go back to what you said before, I didn't just come back from the Forrester meeting all jazzed up, and then like 2 months later, I go to a Gartner meeting, and now I'm on a whole different tangent. Now I think it's, you know, it's automation. We got to get our P robots in here. That's going to like blow the business up. And then people in the trenches are like, this too shall pass. He'll go to another meeting, you know, but I'm not going to get my.
And come back with some other toy, yeah.
Do some crazy thing.
Yeah, I used to feel it was whatever was the last book I read, right? That was the next greatest thing to me, right? Because I just read that book. But Eveline, fundamentally, and this is something, right, the DevOps Institute is deeply ingrained in, and it also becomes a question of how do we upskill our workforce? How do we prepare? Do we just go out and hire new people? That's hard. Do we upskill our existing people for this? What, you know, at the C-level, how do we affect that?
Yeah, so from our research at the DevOps Institute, we know that most organizations are actually preferring to leverage their existing resources to train them, right, and to upskill them. Now, upskilling, of course, has its challenges, because you don't just upskill around processes of learning a new way of doing continuous delivery, or it's not just about upskilling new technical skills, it's also about human skills. So that's, I think, the challenge. A lot of organizations are biting themselves into that, or pushing themselves, or actually locking themselves into the corner. They think, yeah, let's give them AWS training. Let's let them understand what the latest DevOps platform is, and give them some language skills around whatever the latest hotshot technology programming language is. But it's also soft skills or human skills which are necessary. People need to understand how to work empathetic, how to collaborate, how to connect, how to cross functional borders, how to understand when a security individual tells me something. So, having skills around these different categories is important. And there is investment needed. We see that unfortunately 7% of survey participants we had last year said that they have no idea what their upskilling programs are. We know 37% of these individuals, a very large sample size of almost 1,200, said that we don't have a program in upskilling, and the rest of them either are planning one or have one. So that's really unfortunately poor and not enough. So anybody listening in, get ready to upskill your people, start thinking about training, start thinking about exchanging knowledge and allowing them to learn, give time. I, for myself, and we're doing that at the DevOps Institute a little more, and our CEO does that a little as well. I call Friday my learning day. And it doesn't matter what happens, unless the CEO wants me there. Friday is my learning day. I learn French, I learn about design thinking, and I'm learning about metrics. That's it. And we all have to do that. It's very important.
Agreed. Louise, you go in as a consultant. What, in terms of the skill level of the workforce, do you try to upskill them? Do you supplement it with fresh talent? It's hard. I mean, getting fresh talent in, Mark, in the Valley, they cut each other's throats for this. How do you do that?
I mean, it's an interesting thing because you're trying to fly an aircraft while changing the engine in some cases, and it's the same people that need to transform are the same people that need to run and drive the aircraft. And also, if you brought in too much fresh talent, then you would probably put the nose in the joint of the people that are supposed to be helping you run the process anyway. So the way I've done it is I've gone in and we've identified some highly skilled people that know the processes really well, and then supplement them with some more transactional process mappers and people like that, so that those people that run the processes can also see things like how do they do the process mapping, how do they identify the pain points, how do they convert it into business cases, how do they use it and then convert it into technology. So on that journey, the people that are running their processes are also being upskilled at the same time into continuous improvement and transformation. But I say that there's also, it's not about upskilling necessarily on all sorts of things, because as technology is changing, there's less the need for upskilling, because a lot of technology is self-serve type technology now. A lot of the RPA tooling now, people can do it like they learn Excel, like they learn, Word and things like that. So the upskilling, like it used to be about, spending months and months, programming and that type of thing. There's less the need for that. It's more about the upskilling in terms of continuous improvement, and it's a cultural change, I think somebody mentioned earlier. So it is going in and using the resources that are there, upskilling those people and slightly supplementing them and doing hands-on job training.
Excellent. Mark, Mitchell, I'm going to give you each a chance to kind of close it out here, and then I think we're about out of time. Mark, final thoughts?
Well, let me just make a final comment, along the lines of this last topic. And I've been through many of these reskilling things, and seeding that group with new talent, I think, is essential. I mean, if somebody came into me and said, I don't know, we're going to go to DevOps and we're going to bring, you can have consultant money. The consultants will come in, they'll be here 90 days, 120 days. I mean, this is an acquired skill. It's almost an art form, at its finest. And the devil is in the details. And the day the consultants leave, everybody's left to their own devices. And it'd be just like saying, well, let's just shut down the data center and move everything in the data center up onto AWS, and we'll get some AWS consulting in here, and then they'll leave after 90 days. And you guys run all the production systems up there, in that whole new environment after 90 days of familiarization. I don't think too many companies would take that kind of a risk. So I think people get so carried away with thinking that reskilling can be effective, that people will come to embrace it. And I hate to say this, but in my personal experience, if you reskill a population of people, 20% will be superstars, 20% won't get it, and 60% will be good enough. But if one of the 60% left, you'd recruit somebody in with a higher skill level than the person that left. So they make forward progress, and I'm not denigrating, people's commitment to new things, but you've got to bring in that fresh talent that's been there and done that. They kind of know they know what it's supposed to look like, right? And they can look around a corner and they can see the big fuzzy hole in the road that we're all going to fall into here in the next 2 months. So that's
Mitchell, you want to bring it home?
Yeah, I'd like to just wrap with the human element, but maybe from a little different perspective. Change, people react to change in different ways. Your advocates, great, they're all about it. Your resistors, love them because you can actually work on that. You can help. You can help bring them along. It's that passive, unspoken middle ground. The folks that are waiting to see, before I commit myself, I'm not going to put myself, my job, my career at risk for this next thing. I don't know if I can do it. And the idea of bringing people in, I think one of the main purposes is to show the team, A, it can be done, and B, they can learn it. So it isn't bring the consultants in for 30 days, hand over what they did, and everybody goes, now what do I do, right? So I think if you can de-risk, address the fear of what this means, that you're going to be able to do it, and we're going to stick with you to help you get there, help everybody get there. And if there's some folks that choose not to go along the journey, that's okay too, but we're all in this together. I think you've got to address the human element from a very personal, how does each person feel about this and whether they're signed on to do it? And that's going to guide your success. That's been my experience.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we're about out of time. Mark, Eveline, Louise, and of course, Mitchell, thanks for joining us on this episode of DevOps Unbound. Many thanks to our friends at Tricentis for their sponsorship. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps Unbound. Be well, be safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
From something old, as I mentioned, we're going back to our third annual DevOps experience from last month. In this session, we have Brian Dawson of CloudBees interviewing KK Kosakai, the founder of Jenkins, actually co-founder of CloudBees, has moved on now to his own new company, Launchable. And Brian and KK are going to, celebrate Jenkins' 10th anniversary, taking a look back at the tremendous influence that it's had in the DevOps space and in development and what's going on. So here is KK and Brian Dawson from DevOps Experience.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Dawson, and I'm happy to have you here for our server-side chat, not a fireside chat, on 10 years of DevOps and beyond. I'm joined by Kosuke Kawaguchi. Kosuke, how are you doing today?
Hey.
Glad to have you. Thank you for participating in this session with me. For our audience to kind of give an overview of what we're hoping to accomplish, as we were preparing for this event, which I'm excited to be a part of, the DevOps Experience, we started to think about there are so many things going on in the DevOps space today in terms of tools, technology, and practices. Maybe it would behoove us to talk about how did we land in the place where things like GitOps are so prevalent and so critical to what we do? And I thought it would be great to bring in somebody that was really early stage and at the forefront of our modern automation movement, Kosuke, and discuss how the industry has progressed since the time that Jenkins was introduced to now, and what does that mean for the future of DevOps and the community. And my friend here, as well as a former colleague, as well as someone I look up to, Kosuke, has been kind enough to join us. Before I hand it over to Kosuke, because I believe most of you are like, yes, I know him, but who is the guy in the weird polka dot shirt? I'll introduce myself. I am Brian Dawson. I am a DevOps evangelist for CloudBees, as well as a director in product marketing. I arrive here by way of, I think, 25 plus years in software development. I started as a developer in game development, ran a tools and technology or shared services team for Sony Computer Entertainment in the early days of PlayStation, and then had the privilege between then and now of helping multiple, what were largely Fortune 1000 companies implement agile, continuous integration, and continuous delivery. And most of the time we did that with Jenkins. Kosuke, the man who needs no introduction, as I always pick on him, is an advisor to CloudBees, the former CTO of CloudBees. Today, he is the co-founder and co-CEO of Launchable Inc. Hopefully, he'll tell us more about what Launchable is doing. And in particularly relevant to today's discussion, he is the creator of Hudson and Jenkins. Again, welcome, Kosuke. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background as well as what you're doing today?
After an introduction like that, I don't know what else I can add, really, Brian. But yes, I've been working in the developer productivity space for, I guess, the past 15 years or so. It seems like there are two kinds of engineers in the world. Like one just keep going down and down the technology stack, and then so I think, and then some people who just keep going up and up to more focused on solving people's like end user problems. And clearly, I was a former. So. And then so that's what I've been doing that, and the Jenkins and CloudBees was a major part of my career. And then lately I sort of switched the gear a little bit, like working in this new startup. So hopefully I get to talk a little bit more about that in the coming, coming few hours.
Yeah, I absolutely want to talk about that. So I have on the list, and for the audience as well as us, you and I agreed that there's a number of things that we want to try to hit as we hit this discussion, and they include, but are not limited to, the founding and creation of Jenkins, really the growth of continuous delivery, the everything is code movement that is the foundation for GitOps, but then also in there is machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is, I think, where we'll dig in with Launchable, but pretending I'm interviewer for a sec, before I go there, Kosuke, I have to pin you down on the relationship between the continuous integration and possibly even considering the agile movements and the creation of Hudson and Jenkins. And I, like to ask, what drove you to create Jenkins? And then moreover, what impact have you seen, with all of your humility, Jenkins have on the community since? Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, there are a number of reasons. There are a few reasons that sort of conspired together that led me to create like what eventually became Jenkins. One was that I guess I wasn't occupied enough by my day job back then. Like I was a very a prolific, and so I had a number of open source projects going, and this just felt like I was just another one of them. And then so behind this one that became particularly popular, there was like literally hundreds of projects that I don't think anybody has ever heard of. So it just happened to be one of many. Like I was doing a scattershot. But another one was this was around the time when the Sun microsystem, which is where I was working on, was losing a lot of people. So I was looking for ways to kind of beef up, use the technology to beef up the team and the people around me. And like make more people productive. And part of the things was, when the developers are working in a team, they are spending a lot of time communicating on figuring out what the collective truth, the team shared truth is. Like, is this test passing or failing? Did your change break something or not? And then, back then we had a phone system to do these things. Which felt a bit silly. I felt like, this could be a software problem that we can solve. So that was another reason. So those are, I guess, a couple of reasons.
So I'm curious. So first to share, then I had a couple of questions on it. So around that time, I was at Sony Computer Entertainment, or now the PlayStation company, trying to figure out how we increase team productivity. And a little bit of background, right, is around that time we went from, I believe it was PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. We had 16 processors. We went from one dedicated geometry transformation and CPU and an audio chip to those plus 15 additional processors.
Wow.
And we had to figure out, how do we increase efficiency enough that we can capitalize on that increased power, but to put it very grossly, not require 16 times the amount of resources, or 16 times the amount of time to bring a game to market. And I'll talk a bit about what I saw on open source there, or ask you, I'd like to get your thoughts, but that's when we started to engage around, this was the time when SourceSafe was, RCS and SourceSafe were still prevalent as version control systems. BuildForge was just gaining traction. And around then, I think there were some CI servers already out there. I think Continuum was out there. I think ThoughtWorks had taken a first pass at Go. I'm curious, when you thought to create Jenkins, was it identifying a problem sort of independent of these practices that are now well established, or you were watching what was going on in terms of Agile, XP, and specifically continuous integration?
Yeah, no, again, when I started it, I was almost completely blind to what was going in the broader market. It wasn't like I was watching where the industry is going and figured out that this is the right thing for me to work on. It's nothing like that. But I think it's just more or less, it's more like just I was at the right place at the right time. This was around the time, I think, the notion of using more and more computers effectively for to help people became popular. The practice itself has been kind of around for a while, and I do remember seeing a number of open source software in this space, like a cruise control. I think that was
cruise control. That's one I forgot.
Yeah. So I was looking at those software, and I felt like, oh, I could do a better job than these guys, because just writing, just purely from the perspective of writing program.
Right.
So yeah, and then there's the plugin system. I think that was another. Yeah. So that was another sort of a key. For me, like a key ingredient, I thought every software would be better with a plugin system. And as I was looking for opportunity to insert one, and then this felt like another natural vehicle to do so. And yeah, so maybe if anything can be attributed to a careful design, perhaps that is the one. And then I think that was indeed pretty worthwhile investment. It turned out.
Well, I think, in my opinion, sharing memories too, actually, I go back, I don't know if it was 2011, Kosuke, when the first JUC, Jenkins User Conference was held. Is that correct?
Yeah,
at the,
something like that.
Maritime Theater in San Francisco.
That's right.
And I remember, I think it was LifeRay said, they love Jenkins. They talked about how they scale it and use it, but they said, they view it as cron on steroids, right? So sort of a job management, job scheduling system, and it had a lot of power as a general automation server, and it still does.
Yeah.
Something I think was really powerful, and be interested in your thoughts around it, but is what really supercharged it, and there may be other things I'm missing, was the fact that it had a reasonably easy to understand, but also very powerful plug-in architecture. and the ecosystem that grew from Jenkins since then. I would beg to say, and I know I probably pump you up too much sometimes, but that has had a lasting influence and impact on the way tools in this space are built. That in order to implement or support CI and CD in the enterprise, the ability to treat a term I use, tools as microservices, and having an architecture that supports kind of plug and play of additional tools is key. So to stop from me just talking and ask you is how do you think Jenkins itself, and then maybe even more specifically that plugin approach has had impacted what we do since the time it was implemented?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like I learned that, key project that I got inspiration from was actually, I think, Eclipse and NetBeans. Both of them are very extensible platforms and use those plugin mechanisms to a huge success. And so that was, I think, the main source of inspirations. But back then, it was kind of hard to do that for web applications. And I remember when I was working in a group that was doing Java EE, the platform in which Jenkins was built. So I was trying to convince the senior people around me, like, look, like we need to be able to do these things, and like the platform we're providing is awfully inadequate for those purposes. But I couldn't make them understand like what I was trying to like pitch for. So yes, I certainly didn't invent it, but like what it does, I think, and then maybe I also didn't quite understood like all the social or the implications, like why it matters. In some sense, it's while it is also a technical construct, it's actually more of incentive builders for the social structures in the community. Like it allows people to do experiment and build something they want without spending too much time communicating and arguing and convincing other people why doing it is worthwhile. And then that turned out to be a great way to unleash people's creativity. And while it's somewhat chaotic because like, there are a lot of failed experiments, but it also really quickly bubbles up the successful ones, and collectively, like it works very well with this idea of open source projects spanning around the globe and people doing their own thing. So, it's like that was a pleasant surprise that I really felt like my bet was paid off on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you moved on, after that being, serendipitous development and not without, I think, a level of background and thought that was important, even if it's serendipitous. You had, since made a long stretch of your career really focused around, I guess I'd say, for want of a better word, bettering DevOps, right? And bettering DevOps while you bettered Jenkins. And what I think is really interesting about your reference to the impact on a plugin architecture and ecosystem on the social components, it starts to cascade into what was another key thing in the past 10 years within DevOps or enabler. And some people may argue it slightly before, but DevOps, I believe, where we are with the community and its collaboration focus, we wouldn't have achieved it without open source. So there's some of those tenets of collaboration, experimentation, and empowerment that the plugin ecosystem provided, that open source enabled for experimenting with new practices and tools within the enterprise, right? Where you gave an opportunity to allow the users to identify a problem and fix it without having to go through procurement, make a case, go through a POC, bring IBM and 50 guys in to solve the problem, and then only to have the market move beyond you. The next order beyond that is that, we talk, you talk to Patrick Dubois or Chris Beitart, you talk about what they were thinking when they launched the first DevOps days. And what I've heard from them is they just saw that there were people working independently on an area of shared concern. There was a lack of collaboration. And I still hear to this day from them that they see DevOps, it's not about a process or a practice. It's about community and collaboration. It's about community collaborating to solve problems. Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts. What are your thoughts now since that time on the DevOps movement? What interested you in it, and where do you think sort of DevOps practitioners can do or be better?
Yeah, you're talking about the sort of communities exchanging practices and so on, and like one of the things that I keep reminding myself is just how diverse, when it comes to how we build software, the software industry is pretty big and different. Like you talked about the Sony building PlayStation, so that's like a kind of software development. And then there are other people doing like a microcontrollers inside or whatever devices, cars and whatnot. And then there are people like, the web service companies, and the constraints and like the sort of factors surrounding them are so different. Yeah. That leads to the different kind of developer practices. And it's also, so we are sort of starting off with that handicapped state where like there's not a lot of uniformity compared to, let's say, something like CPA. It's a pretty universal thing across the entire nation. But so we start with that background of diversity, but then like we really suck at communicating or sharing and exchanging the practices. So the spread of these things are pretty slow. And I think our primary vehicle is just like a talking or like a presenting and so on. But that's actually still pretty inefficient. Like, when was the last time? Like, think about some of the recent presentations you saw that you felt, that this is really cool. And then think about what it takes to actually apply that in your own team and organization. It's huge effort.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like if you feel based on what you see, because you see a lot of different places, I'd imagine, Brian, as well, but like you feel the sense of this similarity, or do you feel like there's also some convergence factors that's playing?
Well, so I'll go back to the root, and then maybe if I answer it incorrectly, you can redirect me, KK. I still feel like, first I'll say that at the end of the day, irrespective of the space or the type of software, even if it's an embedded system going inside a car's ECU module, at the end of the day, software is developed by humans for humans. Mm-hmm. Everything else in between is enabling and optimizing that. Mm-hmm. So why do I bring that up? Because I think what Jenkins has done to an extent, what open source has done, what the DevOps community has done, has sought to build connections between humans so we can get from that start state to the end state better. And frankly, whether we're influencing that via automation, whether we're influencing that via, say, moving to Kubernetes for container orchestration, so we have more deterministic managed environments, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, we still need to, and will continue to need to, better build connections between different people in the same organization, outside of the organization, and functional organization, to better enable collaboration and unlock the flow of ideas. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about like CI and CD, and you and I both experienced this working at CloudBeast, so I'll probably flip it and ask you a question again. Mm. But I think what we realized is that that when implemented in a local area, within a given functional team, in a group, within a small company, within a given space, CI and CD, while maybe challenging, you can be wildly successful. But then when you try to propagate that across multiple teams, multiple technologies, and what people are trying to do today, implement this as the way they develop software at enterprise scale, I will now get to where I see the same needs you talked about converging. Again, what we have is various communities that are failing to connect and collaborate to achieve efficiency. So what is our challenge, Kosuke? Is we need to figure out how to grow and scale these principles and practices across enterprises, teams, and organizations of all types. Mm-hmm. Did I answer the right question?
No, well, I don't know if I don't think there was any right answer. So, well, I loved where your thought has gone. So, like, but what I was thinking as I was hearing you was, so in my new company, I'm like exclusively building a service now, right? Which is a big change from building a open source package software, which where I was mainly involved at CloudBees, and just. It's a very different mindset because the considerations are different. So I constantly find myself needing to sort of rewire myself, and then in some sense like a similar things happen throughout the different like life cycle of a project as well. So I was thinking, Jenkins was also evolving, and the way I was doing things was also changing, and then so part of what I think makes this like adoption of CI/CD practice a journey that like it doesn't seems to be so time consuming is it's like a parent growing up as kids grow up, and then so like the parents need to be at the right mental state and phase depending on the age of the kid, so you can't just like suddenly learn the experience. So I think that's something I think about nowadays.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know we're going to start for push for time, but maybe when you and I have another offline conversation, I'd like to talk about, because I had kids at this stage. I'm going to go on the tangent for a minute. Compared to a lot of people, I had kids relatively young. And it is really interesting to be learning yourself, growing and evolving as you have to steward the growth and evolution of a child. So I could see the correlation, right, with your practices growing, the community growing, and then having to steward a product. I do want to do, because we promised the audience that we talk about futures and we talk about ML and AI. What I'd like to do in our last few minutes here, Kosuke, and if you want to flip it and ask me questions, that's fine. I'd like to highlight one of the other advents that happened in the past 10 years that I credit you for. That I think also speaks to the future. And then let's talk launchable ML and AI. And so one of the things that we actually collaborated on that was part of yours and the Jenkins Governing Board and Projects development was this idea of pipeline as code. So it started as Jenkins scripted pipeline, then Jenkins declarative pipeline at a time when a lot of prominent projects were using configuration to describe things that needed to be done. But at that time, they were largely static. They were JSON or YAML. And your team came to market with pipeline as code really at the early stages of the everything as code movement. Now, today, we're seeing a real wholehearted embracing of things like GitOps for managing your SDLC and your environments and doing them in a repeatable way. I'm curious, where do you think pipeline as code, everything as code, and GitOps has offered value? And what role do you see it playing in the future going forward?
So this, I guess, I also saw this kind of like a movement as a progression, and I certainly don't think like a Jenkins was first anywhere near the first. Like there was well-established ideas around this, doing things as code. I think probably back then it was probably because my immediate predecessor I think of is like a Chef and Puppet. I think these people are really big on those, and so yeah, but it made sense. Like it sense was obviously a good idea, so as a CI system, we also took that on, and it was helpful that the Jenkins is so extensible, so we can learn something like that relatively easily. And then then GitOps, I think that one came a little later, but it's also like a continuation of the same theme. So yeah, I think it's I think generally, it's pull request and code review becoming a point of team level collaborations, and it's also like a good turning into a good handoff between these invisible big automation systems that the people are building behind the scene and the human visible activities So that seems like a good today's role separations. Well, it just aligns, that technology boundary aligns so well with how people are organizing to work today. Where I am sure you talked a little bit about this, like a productivity engineering central DevOps team. And these people want to build this like a machine that's not necessarily need to be understood by the busy application developer. So where does that organizational boundary, or if the organization boundary feels like a dirty word, you can think of like a collaborations, like a role split.
The connection point, the API. Where's the API?
Yeah. And I think that I'm of the opinion that the technology boundaries reflect these collaboration structures. So I think that it's finding like neat alignment in that, and I attribute that success to that. So
phenomenal.
So,
let me see if I know I'm racing against time now, but what I think was big, and I'll add some commentary, is that we were able to kind of take so source code management, especially modern source code management since CVS, Central Version Control System, moved from not just versioning the work you did so it was traceable and trackable, but also facilitating collaboration, right? And that was really unlocked and brought to bear with the pull request, right? As well as some of the other functionality GitHub built around that. And so on the bright side, on one side, everything as code kind of brought forth some of the best of software development practices, collaboration practices, to managing your SDLC. But there was another shift, and that is that, as we know, a Jenkins freestyle job was oftentimes heavily configured through your GUI. If you were dealing with any release orchestration solution at that time, you were dealing with a GUI. Now, there's times for GUIs, but as you talk about that collaboration boundary, to drill in on that, look, now we're moving into a space where your shared services, sort of your DevOps engineer, your developer, and your release manager all kind of have to collaborate around this shared system of truth. Now, what I believe is why we're going to see, we've seen it with software-defined networks and other things, we're going to see increased adoption of everything as code for the software development as best practices. But you know what? The GUI doesn't go away. And what I'm starting to see, that is, I almost call it a case of serializing. What we're starting, and then it's probably a better term for it, right? We're starting to see serialization into code and deserialization from code that allows the different stakeholders to interact from the position and the perspective that is best fit for them, but still have it all reconcile to the same thing. Anyway, a lot of words there, but I think that aligns to the collaboration boundary or interface point needing to align with the technology boundary or interface.
Yeah, so I mean, I wholeheartedly agree about the importance of GUI, and in fact, like in the early days of Jenkins, that's what made it accessible. I call this like the fear of the blank canvas. It's like, when you're asking, when people have ability to, when we tell people to, you can type up this like a configurations code, like they need to start with like an empty slate, and that's pretty scary. And I think it makes sense, like a GUI is needed. The same thing with Amazon, right? Like, it's unthinkable not to have Amazon AWS console, but any real ops people are using something like Terraform. So now you talked a little bit about how those things might converge, and I think that would be maybe like one of the holy grails. Like, I think that might, if somebody managed to kind of solve that, that would have a far-reaching implications, because they're in so many domains. Like my kids programmed a little bit by using Scratch. It's another GUI programming environment, and then if something can bridge the paradigm between this text, like a version controllable world, and like a more accessible GUI, quick and pointy thing, that would be amazing. So that would be truly a worthy problem to solve. So when are you working on it, Brian?
I was just going to say, when are you solving this for us? To shift, I want to, I want to talk a bit about Launchable. What are you doing at Launchable? Why did you found it? You and Harpreet, your co-founder. And then if you can tell me, and I'm also saying this, I know what you guys are doing. I'd like you to share with the audience. I also know for whatever you say, you tend to always be very forward looking. So what are you doing at Launchable, and how does what Launchable decided to focus on serve as an indicator for where we need to be looking at in the future of software development and delivery?
Sure. Yeah. So, part of what like makes me excited is like I want to be helping people, right? And sometimes these larger conversations, like I say, the culture transformations, like digital transformation at the organization level, that can be became a little too big for people having these challenges day in, day out. So I was thinking about like, what are the kind of things like I can bring some immediate help, like, and that was the same thing is like I originally led to me, part of the motivation led me to Jenkins too. And then another thing I was thinking is, well, like I helped like, push the state of automation forward a little bit. And so more and more people are doing lots of automated work around them in the software development. And by and large, we are not using any of the information coming out of these automated systems to improve the process. So, and then that was, and I felt that keenly when at CloudBees, like I could see the marketing people, salespeople are far more number driven and more meticulous and rigorous in how they do work and how they measure their efforts and progress and what needs to change. And I look around and like I see my fellow engineering team, and we're like, oh, we can't tell when the software is done, like that's a stupid thing to ask. Or, so and that made sense. I felt like there gotta be some means in which like I can use all this data that's coming out of automations to maybe help automate some of the decisions or make some of the lives of the developers easier. And that led to this like place where, okay, so we have lots of tests running, like at Jenkins project. Toward the end, I was involved. Like one line change needs to go through the full cycle of test, which is like north of 1 hour. Now I know like this one line change doesn't really need to rerun the entire test suite because most of the tests are testing different parts of the systems, right? But we don't know which one is sensitive, so we just run them all. That felt like a waste. And so, we should be able to do better. Like if I'm making small change, like I just want to be able to run. Do I really need to run all the tests? Probably not. So what can we do? And that felt like, and we discovered like that the machine learning can actually do some things in there that like humans can't cope with because the data amount is so big. So that's what we are working on at Launchable. Yeah.
And do you see to the end of does you guys, and I think intelligently so, are solving a point problem around sort of a very popular and wide topic matter and in a very wide space, right? AI, ML, which has a lot of, wide-reaching applications, and in CI/CD, which is, I heard somebody say earlier, an end-to-end SDLC incorporates 25 plus market categories, right? Types of tools and functions. So you guys you're hyper focused, but then that leads me to say is, do you see where either Launchable or the market in general, right? Other people would be expanding that focus of AI or machine learning or in line with your keynote, data-driven DevOps. What do you see the future? Can you give the me and the listeners a prediction?
Well, it's like a fool's errand, but I am excited about the prospect of, I think, using more data effectively to drive our work. And we can see in other like adjacent spaces, whenever I think about the ops space, like when the stuff that you need to deal with becomes so large in numbers, like the SRE ops folks needs to use hundreds or thousands of machines. Then like it becomes at some point it becomes impossible for mere mortal to understand all the things that's coming out of the fire hose. So you need some means to like kind of crash that data into a small portion of meaningful things. So in the monitoring systems and like generally the tools and like a services that operations guys deal with, like those things have been ongoing for the past five or so years. So the QA to me is like another place where like the amount of fire hose is like going out of control. And then I think the development itself, I think it's going to be following pretty quickly. So I think there's just so much opportunity for data to make our lives better. And really, like, that's probably becoming one of the lower hanging fruits. When,
Yeah, I agree fully. And I'd say to an extent at CloudBees, not to an extent, CloudBees is banking on a similar thing. And as software becomes more critical to core businesses, whether you're in software or not, qualitative signals are important, but we have to start to gather and learn from quantitative signals. And that's going to require gathering data. And then to your point, but to surface meaningful, quantifiable signals out of that data is probably going to require more than realistic day-to-day human cognitive capacity. And I'll make the case today. I think there are. I was excited when I heard about the founding of Launchable, and I'm excited about the opportunity for Launchable in the overall space. I do believe, and I'll make the case now, that there's AI ops, a space that is I think much further ahead in terms of predictive analytics, data capture, and to an extent data management than the left-hand side of development. I think there needs to be a whole market of DevML, dev machine learning, that as we talk about continuous improvement to the extent of what you're doing, we're continuously capturing the outputs and outcomes, cross-correlating them, and not only on the macro sort of KPI level, but all the way down to your point, like in the narrow space of test, in the narrow space of code fitness, right? Let's continue, measure, learn, and guide. And what I will squeeze in is, and I keep squeezing stuff in, sorry, this is fun, is we did some persona research to like really kind of empathetically understand what developers' motivations, frustrations, and fears were. You know what one of the number one fears were, Kozga?
No.
Imposter syndrome. Not being perceived as knowledgeable by their peers. And then one of their number one frustrations that related to that fear was the wide range of emerging technologies and trying to keep up to speed with them and finding it very difficult to learn, to achieve the competency. And so as you and I think, talked about years ago about this idea of guided pipelines, right? I think at some point we can use machine learning on the dev side of the house to actually help humans learn faster and get better as they develop code. But,
So that's interesting. So I mean, so when you hear about like most people having imposter syndrome, like what do you think about? Like, is that like what does that tell you?
It tells me a couple of things, and I'm going to try to answer it. I think it tells me that you have a I'm stumbling and phrasing it. It tells me that in a space where knowledge is heralded, it's highly valued, and at the same time is rapidly evolving, you end up in a place where people are constantly evaluating themselves based on their breadth of knowledge about subjects, and that results in people feeling like they're constantly behind, but it is a false feeling. Nobody knows everything. As you started to and I was still hiring for and applying for engineering jobs, the list of languages and technologies that you needed to know started to get kind of ridiculous. Well, you have to know COBOL, Pascal, know Ruby on Rails. You need to know Nginx. Plus, you need familiarity with LAMP stacks. You need to understand artificial intelligence and algorithm development. And you must have a bachelor's, a master's, and 10 years of computer science. Right? It's not hard to feel like an imposter in that space. And where I worry, I think part of it is a reality that drives us, but where I worry that it is going to hurt us is that it's going to have a lot of people with a lot of creative thinking that may not have the depth of credentials behind them it will stop them from joining in on the technology community. And that will actually further increase the digital divide across race, class, and otherwise. So we need to use culture, tools, and other items to mitigate the constant feeling of imposter syndrome, so we can bring more people in, unlock their potential, and help them drive the space forward. Is that the answer? Is that the right answer?
Like,
No,
there's no right answer. Yeah, but that's really cool. So I didn't think of. So I guess what you're saying is like, you know, for some people, this imposter syndrome kind of almost prevents them from entering the field. In some other folks, like that doesn't stop them. They fake it till make it, and so that creates this diversity gap. It's almost that's true. Like,
it's bigger, which translates to an economic gap, because especially in North America, the tech economy is kind of the most vibrant economy, and it's the economy of the future. So not only does it potentially create a gap in who we're solving solutions for, they're solved with some bias, but you know what? Those who for various multitude of complex reasons sit on the sideline or are not brought into this, they also don't see the economic gains of the growing job market, and we increase the separation. But you know what? I'm taking us off on a whole nother slant.
Well, I was thinking about, when I was hearing about this imposter syndrome, I was thinking about like this interview that I made a point of doing. You know, when people come to conferences and talk about how they are killing things, like they put themselves into this certain mental state where like, I'm doing great, like I'm going to talk about this from the position of the strengths. But when I go visit them in their home base, like their workplace, and so I ask about, so like, how are you developing software? And then tell me what are your challenges? And like, when people suddenly feel like, well, everywhere else, like the grass is greener everywhere else, and like they're totally like falling behind. And like, surprisingly mundane problems are actually still there, and they're pretty universal. And that's part of the consideration that for me led to Launchable. Like QA testing, if I may say so, it's boring. Like it's been known to be a problem for like, you know, the half a century probably, right? But still, it's still very much with us. So sometimes I feel like, you know, like people don't want to be admitting that those are the major challenges that they're having, but in some sense, I think it's kind of pulling us. It's not all the shiny new things that's worthwhile that needs to be done. It's like a lot of mundane things. And I'm actually glad you brought that up. But I think there's a couple of things we need to realize that we can do. I'm sure let's continue to try to mitigate the tedious, right? Mitigate the mundane, so people can do bigger, more important things faster. But you highlight that we maybe do the community a disservice when the only time we share is when we're showing the happy path and success. Exactly.
We would probably do the community better service if we transparently and in a vulnerable way share failures. Right? Or struggles, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I know I can talk to you for hours. I've never been short of an opinion or a question. I think DevOps experience is going to force us to wrap this up. Before we sign off, Kosuke, I'd like to ask, do you have any final comments for the audience on the past, present, or future of DevOps and software delivery?
Oh, wow. That's like a big TF poll. I don't know. What would I say? Yeah, I feel like maybe we have our opportunities to make impacts just keep getting bigger. Like our developers, despite all the challenges we just talked about, I think the kind of like a mountain we can move single-handedly is like so much bigger now than just 10 years ago or 20 years ago and so on. So I think that opportunity is incredible, and I hope that allows all of us to kind of scratch surfaces into different directions. I feel like that's the obligation to our mankind from us, if you may, like that. So that's how I think about it, and I hope we all do our share in pushing the ball forward.
Thank you. And that's would have covered, I think, what I would have said. So Kosuke, thank you for joining me for this conversation. Thanks you for sharing your thoughts, your experience, and in fact, taking the time to ask what some of my thoughts are. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. Please make sure you look into Launchable Inc. and see what Kosuke and team are doing there. And please take a chance to stop by cloudbees.com and learn how we're helping people build stuff that matters at enterprise scale.
So much more than Jenkins now.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks much to KK and Brian. Great session at DevOps Experience. You know, all of the DevOps Experience sessions are still available, devopsexperience.com. You can go check them out. Next up, we're going to hand things over to our Chief Content Officer and Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has today's news, headlines around the MediaOps sites. She also has a great preview of, I think we have almost 10 different webinars spread across all of the MediaOps sites this week. She's going to give you a preview of some of those, as well as two really good interviews, one with Grant Miller, CEO and co-founder of Replicard, and one with Vinay Snidara, CTO of Babix. So here now is Charlene O'Hanlon.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon with the Monday edition of the news headlines. Got lots of stuff happening on the site, so let's go ahead and kick it off. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at how organizations can build and nurture a product team even in times of crisis, such as the pandemic. The author takes what he's learned during the past 8 or so months and distilled it into some takeaways that organizations can consider. For one, he said, digital natives are a necessity. In this new world of Zoom, Slack, and other digital channels, employees who grew up with and have a certain level of comfort with technology are essential. But other traits are necessary too. The perfect product person, he said, starts with curiosity and ability to poke and prod and find inefficiencies by asking the right questions and always seeking a better solution. This is most definitely an article worth checking out if your team is starting to lose a little bit of its luster during the pandemic. And we have an article that looks at 3 pretty significant development challenges that engineers are facing as the development process becomes more complex, along with systems, software, and products. This increased complexity means teams now need better ways of working to be able to dot the I's and cross the T's, so to speak. Specifically, they need purposeful, structured collaboration tools, better ways of being connected with their distributed workforce, team members, and more accurate feedback, decision-making, and context for requirements under review. In today's distributed work environment, organizations need to do what they can to ensure their workforce has the resources they need to do their job effectively and efficiently. This absolutely holds true in DevOps. So give this article a look, definitely. All right, in news, Algorithmia has launched a performance monitoring for machine learning models that tracks algorithm inference and operations metrics generated by the enterprise edition of its namesake platform for building these models. Algorithmia Insights provides a level of observability into machine learning models that DevOps teams have come to expect from applications. And to make that monitoring capability more accessible, the company has partnered with Datadog to stream operational and user-defined inference metrics from Algorithmia to the open-source Kafka data streaming platform, from which the Datadog Metrics API can consume that data. And over on Container Journal, we have a really interesting article that takes a look at whether Kubernetes is the appropriate technology for edge computing. You know, at first glance, Kubernetes checks every box necessary for edge computing technology. You know, infrastructure abstraction, the ability to leverage distributed compute elements, extensibility, and a thriving ecosystem and community. But Kubernetes alone won't make a great edge computing solution, as it still is missing critical elements to be a full-fledged solution. This article details exactly what's needed for edge computing and Kubernetes, and notes that there is still much work to be done. Over on Security Boulevard, our cyber law expert Mark Rash takes a look at the recent court decision that allows a third-party consultant to be included in a lawsuit related to the Marriott Starwood data breach a few years back. The consultant in question is Accenture, and the judge ruled that it should be included in the suit because, among other reasons, it essentially acted as the security provider for Starwood. Accenture, as the service provider, owed a duty to prevent data breaches to Starwood's customers. This is significant because with the growing number of security service providers out there, especially during the pandemic, there is now a level of responsibility that they have to protect not only their customers, but their customers' customers. Any consultants in the InfoSec space, cloud providers, and third-party service providers may be taking on much more liability than they think. It may be time, Mark said, to look into comprehensive cybersecurity insurance policies that cover first and third-party claims. And we also have an interesting piece on the growing need for network invisibility for effective security in the era of Industry 4.0. In other words, IoT. These billions of endpoints on networks these days are new threat vectors for cyber criminals, and regular security technologies such as firewalls are not enough, and even network visibility solutions don't actually provide real visibility because they can't or they don't get all the data collected by sensors to their SIEM, which means organizations have only a partial view into their networks. What's needed, according to the article, is network invisibility, not network visibility. The idea is that hackers can't hack what they don't see, so you need to make sure your network isn't visible to them. Newly configured architectures for network security now exist that essentially cloak IoT devices, so they are unseen and therefore unknown to cybercriminals. Really interesting stuff. All right, that's it for today's news headlines. Please check back tomorrow. We will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, please have a great day and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Grant Miller, who is, are you CEO of a company called Replicated? Is that your title?
I am, yeah. I'm CEO and co-founder.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today on TechStrong TV. I really appreciate it.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about your company. Tell me what you guys are all about, and tell me about this most recent round of funding that you just received.
Yeah, so we just raised $25 million as a Series B. The company's been around for almost 6 years. And we basically have a thesis, and what we kind of been proving with our customers is that there's a large market for what we call modern on-prem software. So delivering Kubernetes-based applications into complex enterprise environments as private instances. And so we provide software that makes it easier for these software vendors to actually operationalize and scale the delivery of these Kubernetes-based applications into these environments. So our customers are folks like UiPath and HashiCorp, Puppet and Tripwire, a lot of really sort of technical teams that are using our technology and our products to deliver their products into these enterprise environments. So over 50% of the Fortune 100 end up having applications deployed through our platform into these private environments.
That's an interesting take on things, because I mean we hear so much about the cloud is the future and cloud native and all that stuff, but you guys are really advocating the on-prem experience as it were. So what why on-prem? What are kind of the benefits of going that route for these companies?
Yeah, so there's a lot of nuance here, right? Like just like anything, the nuance really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that sort of when you think about the cloud, right? There's really two categories of what falls into the cloud. The first is what we know as infrastructure as a service, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the hyper cloud providers, AWS and Google and Azure. And then there's software as a service, right? SaaS. And so these are multi-tenant applications that are oftentimes deployed on top of infrastructure as a service, and but are managed by a software vendor who's sort of updating the software and doing other things to the underlying data and managing how that application is run. And so it's important to kind of differentiate the cloud in those two different categories.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, I would say that Replicated is actually very enabled by the cloud. We're enabled, one, by infrastructure as a service, because what's happened in the last 6 or 7 years is the rise of what's called the VPC, right? The virtual private cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And what virtual private clouds do is they give enterprises the same elastic compute and storage, right? This sort of programmable infrastructure that's in a cloud environment, but on private networks. And so they can actually mimic a lot of the same functionality of an on-prem data center within their own VPC. So it's still the cloud, it's just their AWS account, not the vendor's AWS account. So that's a really important differentiation. And the next piece is really about cloud native, right? So cloud native doesn't necessarily mean it's deployed to the cloud. It means that it's built with an abstraction between the application and the underlying infrastructure. And that abstraction is really this programmable interface, right? So you would write an application not for a specific server or architecture, but for a broader platform. And so we think about this shift away from what was happening 20 years ago when the SaaS world really started, right? So it's, Salesforce and these companies are actually 20 years old, the kind of legacy software companies.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened is we've created these new platforms, right? So instead of doing application-based operations, the entire world has shifted to what we call platform-based operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So write applications that are leveraging these APIs underneath the hood that sort of then interface with the underlying infrastructure. And so what's happened is we've shifted away from operating all of these applications independently to operating a platform which automates the operations of these applications. And so, we kind of put this all together. What this allows for is enterprises to consume totally automated private instances of third-party applications in their own environments. And so that's basically the best of SaaS because it's automated in the same way that SaaS was. It's the best of traditional on-prem because it's secure and you never have to send your data out to all these different vendors. And so we see this model emerging, and we've been partnering with companies that have also seen this as the future and helping them sort of deliver their software in this way.
So you said your company's been around for about 6 years or so. Was this, when you guys first came up with the idea and came to market, what was the reaction among organizations who heard about what you guys were doing?
Yeah, so most VCs thought we were assholes. They were just like, well, you don't understand the future. This is not where it's going. On-prem software is not a thing. It's all SaaS. You're idiots. And I had Salesforce execs laugh in my face. But what we saw was that, this evolution in infrastructure software, particularly around containers and Docker, was this going to change the way that software is developed and deployed? And we're like, this is just going to be so different in the future, and it's going to be more automated, right? I think I often ask people, I'm like, do you think that software is going to be more or less automated in the future? And everyone always answers more automated. So it's like, well, at what point can you just hand over the manifests that describe how the application should be run to a totally separate team, external from the team that developed it, and let them deploy it into their own cluster in their own environment? And I think people realize that, like, we're actually there. Like, we've reached that point. You know, it might not be perfect for every application, but there's still a huge number of products and services that make more sense to be run privately in your own infrastructure, away from the prying eyes of software vendors, and where an enterprise, you know, can have total control over the data they're putting into that application.
Yeah, well, there's definitely something to be said about issues, you know, regarding privacy and compliance, and you know, just you know, the whole security aspect of having something on-prem. I'm sure that's a huge value proposition for a lot of these organizations. Yeah, is that the main driver for this, though? I mean, are we also talking about issues of scalability and throughput and just, you know, the agility associated with you know, with this type of setup?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, no matter what, the advantages of delivering the actual applications to where the data already resides, it does reduce a lot of, you know, network throughput, and you do end up co-locating, you know, some of these applications next to each other. It just makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
And in our mind, you know, being able to just run somebody's application privately and securely through your exact same CI/CD process, right? Like using the automation that you as an enterprise already have set up to deploy third-party applications, just makes a ton of sense. And so enterprises, you know, have been looking for ways to automate, you know, third-party applications in their own environments for a long time. I mean, they were running jars, they were running OVAs. You know, the funny thing, and kind of dirty secret about on-prem software market is that, you know, people always thought SaaS was this huge market. It's $100 billion a year. And one of the reasons that everyone sort of always says, like, oh yeah, and it's going to grow a lot because on-prem is still $400 billion a year, right? And so we looked at that and said the opposite thing. We said on-prem software is still $400 billion a year. Like, why is that, right? Like, in much of on-prem software to date has been really terrible. Like, so this terrible software is still 4 times larger than SaaS. Like, why is that? So we said there must be something to the model here, to the privacy, to the security. And so we said, well, what can we do to actually kill terrible legacy on-prem software? You know, Mark Benioff thought the answer might be SaaS. He said 20 years, and he's not been right. And we think the answer to killing terrible on-prem software is really good on-prem software. Right?
Well, makes sense, right?
Not that complicated, you know?
I wonder, is that in your business plan? We just want to make really good on-prem software.
Yeah, just make it less terrible and eventually make it amazing. Like that was our goal. That's how we set it out to do it.
That's really cool. So have you seen maybe particular, I don't know, verticals that have kind of glommed onto this idea maybe faster than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, within Replicated's customer base, there's really 2 halves. So we have our direct customers, and those are the software vendors, right? Folks like Tripwire and HashiCorp and UiPath and CircleCI. And then on the other side are the enterprise IT admins. And so these are, you know, organizations like the intelligence community or banks, but also the adopters of like modern enterprise software happen to be some of the most high-tech sort of organizations in the world, right? So a lot of your leading software companies, like Coinbase has been a referenceable public customer for us for years, consuming private instances of other people's software. This turns out, like, if they send, you know, records of every Coinbase user into 1,000 different SaaS products, it's really bad for their security model. And the same thing is true for, you know, companies like Google and Facebook. Like, they're not just going to turn on any SaaS application and start pumping customer data into it. They just can't do it.
Right.
And so they will often work with vendors and ask for private instances. So, you know, that's like the enterprise side, right? You know, oftentimes I think people always assume it's only going to be banks and healthcare, but like there's a lot of really high tech companies that are consuming private instances this way.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So, and then the other side, right? The software vendors. This is where we found the best early adopters. So when we started off, we were working with primarily developer tools. These are folks who were, 5 or 6 years ago, were leveraging containers in production. And so they were ready to adopt replicated. And then over time, the categories have shifted from just developer tools to doing a lot of ops tools. So this is where like Sysdig and HashiCorp came in. And then the next came data tools. And so this is where folks like Plotly and UiPath and Modsy became customers. Mm-hmm. And then the most recent category that we've really had a lot of success in is in security, right? So this is where Tripwire and Sneak would fall into. And so those 4 categories are kind of our main 4 categories today. But we eventually imagine that the MarTech stack will start to realize that keeping up with GDPR compliance and being a vendor of record for every one of your customers is really hard. Mm-hmm. And that instead of like needing to consume every piece of customer data, they can start to deliver their applications into customer environments. And so we do expect it to continue to really reach more and more companies.
That's really cool. And I was going to say the fact that you do have organizations such as banks that have these big mainframes and these systems of records, the fact that they're kind of considering alternatives to that highly structured on-prem environment to really kind of help them increase their operational agility and reap so many more benefits with that data, I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times, these banks, they have a lot of customer data that folks have trusted them with. And I think one thing that's really interesting that's happened in the last few years is the relationship that enterprises have with consumer data has really changed. I think 5 or 6 years ago, most enterprises would think that they owned every piece of data that they touched, right? Hey, customer gave it to me, we own it.
Right.
But I think now, because of the zeitgeist of how data is treated, because of the regulatory environment, organizations realize they're no longer owners, but they're custodians, right? Or they're stewards of that data. And that changes how they think about what they can do with that data. So now, if I'm a bank and a customer's trusted me with their data, it's really hard for me to go trust 600 other vendors with access to that data. So instead, I need to bring the software into a place that I control it, and I don't have to give the vendors access. They can give me their application, and I can run it securely, privately in my own environment.
Awesome. Well, hey, Grant, I think this is amazing technology. I think you guys are doing great things, and congratulations on your latest round of funding.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really excited.
All right. Well, let's stay in touch, and you can update me later on how things are going with you guys.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right.
We keep growing, so we're adding new customers all the time.
Excellent. Well, best of luck to you. And thanks for being here on TechStrong TV with me.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. Welcome to the Monday edition of Webinars Preview. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. We always have so many great webinars here on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. As always, check the websites for a complete listing of both upcoming and on-demand. But I thought I'd give you a preview of 3 that are coming up very quickly in the hopes that maybe you can mark your calendars and join us. First one is happening tomorrow, Tuesday, November 10th at 9 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's called Improve the Reliability of Your Kubernetes Clusters, and it's sponsored by Gremlin. This webinar will take a look at how organizations can improve the availability and reliability of their Kubernetes clusters using chaos engineering. They'll talk a little bit about how to use chaos engineering to safely inject failure into applications and nodes to detect weaknesses. Also take a look at some of the chaos experiments to run on Kubernetes and some specific recommendations organizations can use to harden their infrastructure, improve reliability, and keep the application running smoothly. All right, next webinar is also happening Tuesday, November 10th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. It's called the DevSecOps Showdown, How to Bridge the Gap Between Security and Developers. It's sponsored by WhiteSource. This one sounds a little bit like the Jets and the Sharks, but I don't think it's like that. So this webinar actually focuses on that push-pull between security and developers and what organizations can do to foster a strong relationship between the two to foment DevSecOps. They'll take a look at some of the challenges of security and dev teams regarding application security, the contradicting views and gaps between the teams around DevSecOps, and how to break the silos and advance toward DevSecOps maturity. Certainly, this is one worth checking out if DevSecOps remains an issue within your organization. The last webinar today is also happening Tuesday, November 10th. This one is at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's called Monitoring Your AWS EKS Environment with Datadog, and it's sponsored by Datadog. And it's a Datadog focused webinar that walks viewers through how they can use the Datadog technology with Amazon AWS EKS, including how to monitor metrics, logs, and traces from the EKS environment, how to test the usability of the environment and find and fix user-facing issues using features such as adaptive browser test and real user monitoring. Definitely one worth checking out if you're interested in learning more about the Datadog technology and how it works in AWS EKS environments. All right, that's all I have for today's edition of the Webinars Preview. Please check back tomorrow when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Vinay Sritara, who is the CTO of a company called Balbix. Vinay, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's start. Balbix is a cybersecurity company. I was hoping that you could kind of fill us in on the details.
Yeah. So, at a high level, I mean, like if I had to tell somebody what Balbix is in like 3 words, I would actually say Balbix is the breach prediction platform, right? It's the industry's first cybersecurity platform which leverages artificial intelligence, right, in order to predict and prioritize how the cybersecurity needs to be analyzed and addressed from an enterprise perspective.
Neat stuff. Neat stuff. So, one of the recurring conversations that I've been having on TechStrong TV since we really started was the increase in cybersecurity breaches, data breaches, cybersecurity attacks that are directly related to the pandemic and COVID-19. And so it doesn't really seem like things are slowing down at all. In fact, maybe, we may even be seeing even more cyber attacks directly as a result of it. So I'm wondering what your company is seeing and, what can we expect?
Yeah, I would actually say that the kind of cybersecurity attacks have actually been evolving and changing ever since, we've had connectivity, right? Like all the way from a few worms to people going after a few servers. Now this has become a lot more sophisticated where many different attack vectors are actually utilized by the adversaries to get to the core of what they are looking for and how to get them out, right? So in essence, the whole concept of this perimeter defense is kind of becoming very, very hard to actually enforce. And especially with COVID, what kind of a perimeter defense are we talking about, right? Most people are working from home.
Right.
So all the firewall infrastructure and everything that we have actually put together from a workplace perspective is no longer relevant, right? Because one could say that I'm going to enforce everything by going through VPN, but then, however, I mean, like you can always say like, okay, I'm going to do what I want to do at a later point in time. And one thing for sure we have to be cognizant and mindful of is that the adversaries are very patient. They sit and wait, right? So given that, I think what we have been seeing is that there has certainly been a rise in the ransomware, certainly been a rise in the phishing related attacks, because those are basically the, say like, the gateway into getting into an enterprise's core, right? Those are the perimeter assets. This could be like admin assets. It could be like any other employees having like privilege into like some of the very important assets within their enterprise environment or cloud environment. It could be any of these things.
So
right?
And we are seeing, I mean, I've heard so many different stories about, spear phishing and social engineering attacks that are just being, companies are just getting hammered by them because of the number of employees that are, working from home. So,
right.
It seems, it seems pretty obvious that would be happening, but it seems also that that these attacks are getting so much more sophisticated that they're virtually impossible to detect these days because the level of sophistication that these hackers are using now to replicate web pages and emails and just make it look make it look like a professional, like it is the real thing. So, and I can understand how organizations can protect their perimeter, but to your point, because everybody's working from home, that's become so much more difficult. So, are we fighting a losing battle with this?
I mean, like, irrespective of COVID or not COVID, right? Like, let's actually take some numerical examples over here. For a mid-sized company, anywhere between like 3,000 to 5,000 employees, right? Like we are looking at like anywhere between like 15 to 20,000 assets at a rate of like 3 assets to 4 assets per employee, right?
Right.
And spread across multiple categories, which starts with like smartphones, tablets, desktop, laptops, servers, different kinds, right? And firewall complexes, networking assets, cloud infrastructure, all of these things. And then there is actually the different kinds of attack vectors that are actually able to get or are effective against like different kinds of these, right? If you look at desktop laptops or smartphone tablets, it's mostly like phishing, ransomware, web kind of attacks, right? When it comes to getting through the perimeter and getting into the core, it's essentially utilizing bad certificates or like weak passwords, any of these things. So, or certificate issues, right? Many different attack vectors. If you think about it, like there are hundreds. So for any mid-sized organization to say like, I have got a good grasp of like everything that is going in my environment, they probably are looking at analyzing anywhere between 15 to 300 million time varying signals per second.
Wow.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Right. So now add pandemic and add that, okay, some of your defenses or some of your mitigation strategies are not 100% effective because people are working from home. This just exacerbates the problem. To the bottom line here is this, right? Like the pandemic has certainly, I mean, like, increased the, the attack surface area, increased the probability of somebody getting through. But however, attackers are sophisticated. It is very important to have a good visibility into your entire organization. And then given the number of resources, it's very important to prioritize. What do I need to protect first? What is my weakest link in the chain, right? So that's how we have to look at it.
And, you kind of add into the mix the fact that, I mean, even before the pandemic, people were screaming about the fact that there's a lack of qualified security professionals. That just adds to the problem. So, I know technologies that rely heavily on automation are they're so helpful for organizations to be able to just kind of move beyond the mundane and be able to, just help kind of get rid of the detritus, if you will, so that they can focus more on the value-added activities. But what other things can organizations do to kind of help clear the clutter, if you will, and give them a clearer view of exactly what's happening, so that they can be more proactive in defending their perimeter, wherever it is, and their employees?
Yeah. So I think first of all, I mean, with all my colleagues, the customers, essentially the partners, right, or the ones who actually treat Balbix as a partner to help solve the security problem. They're all pretty smart guys. And they know what needs to be done. It's just that the volume of things that need to get done is insane, right? So a WannaCry comes out one day, and then, you have like 2 hours to patch your 5,000 assets. Come on. That's insane, right? Like, you have to analyze, like, if I patch this, if a particular server goes down, what is going to happen? Should I even do this now? Should I do this later? The sense of prioritization, if somebody were to say, like, okay, hey, you know what, don't worry about it. If you can actually patch like 20 assets in the next 1 hour, these are the 20 assets. If you need to fix the passwords of like 10 different employees, these are the 10 different employees. If you need to give phishing training to 20 employees, here are the 20 employees, right? That level of prioritization is actually critical to function. People keep saying, like, okay, there is not enough workforce. Yes, absolutely, I completely agree. But even if there was enough workforce, this is still not a problem that can actually be solved without automation. This is a problem that cannot be solved without prioritization. And we very strongly believe, and our customers very strongly believe, that use of artificial intelligence in the right manner, and the ones that actually work with the cybersecurity professionals in a way that they can actually tweak it and tune it, is the way to go about it.
Makes total sense. So tell me a little bit more about your technology and how it works with maybe other security platforms to kind of create this more holistic or end-to-end kind of solution to enable that, that level of automation and prioritization that companies obviously need during this time.
Yeah, I think one of the most fundamental, or like the foundational aspect of the cybersecurity practice should be visibility. Mm-hmm. When I say visibility, I'm talking about like real-time visibility into inventory, into what users are doing, how the assets are actually interacting with each other, what does the global threat actually look like, what new vulnerabilities are actually coming out, which passwords are compromised. All of this information is very important. Mm-hmm. This is visibility, this is key, right? And the system that can actually take all of this information, correlate it, present a coherent view of like what exactly is the focus area, what are the hotspots. Like, if you actually see my background, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of like what the cybersecurity landscape actually looks like. You just need to know where are the red spots, where are the green spots, where are the yellow spots. Red spot is something that I need to go after right now, right? Green spots, I'm good with it. And yellow spot is basically something that I can deal with like tomorrow.
Right. Okay. That's pretty cool, actually. I like the topology map idea. That's kind of a nifty way of looking at things. So, well, that's great. I have you seen that change over the course of the last 6 months or so? Have you seen any maybe spikes in certain areas or just kind of trends in the way things have changed?
Yes. So the certainly, because as we discussed earlier, because of this pandemic, with people working from home, mm-hmm. the spear phishing attacks are basically even what do you call the whaling attacks, right? Like whaling mm-hmm. attacks. So right. have certainly increased, and they have like two adverse effects. One of them is that the adversary would be able to get through. And the second one is that this causes, especially from like spear phishing attacks from like executives' perspective, which is what we call as like whaling or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. It causes embarrassment. right? And these things have how do you put it, like a detrimental effect on like how customers are the generally, I mean, like how people view the company's cybersecurity posture.
Sure.
Right? Like, for example, if I'm trusting my bank with my money, I need to be sure, right? If I'm trusting my company with, I mean, like, I need to be sure. So I think those are certain areas which has actually certainly spiked up. And the other thing that we have also seen is that hacks into the VPN systems itself, right? Like where a lot of people actually start using the VPN, people are focused a lot more on like, how do we hack a particular set of things? So, and then the other ones still remain the same, which is once they get through the system, I mean, like, people are not really interested in, adversaries not interested in like hacking one particular person's account, right? They're always interested in like, how do I jump from here to here to here to here and get to a point where I have enough information which I could destroy from like a confidentiality or integrity perspective, or cut it down from an availability point of view, or take it away and sell it, right? So I think from a core perspective, the attacks have not really changed. From a perimeter perspective, there has been certainly spikes which are related to people working from home.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 6 months or so as, companies start opening up a little bit, and then, maybe we get a next wave and everybody's got to go work at home again. It'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with that topology map, especially. Maybe we'll have you guys back in another 6 months and we'll talk about it again, because I'd certainly like to see how things have changed over the that time period. So
certainly.
Great. Awesome. Well, Vinay, thank you very much for your time today and your expertise. Good stuff. I like I said before, I've had lots of conversations about cybersecurity in the age of COVID, and unfortunately the news is not all good. I wouldn't say any of the news is good during this. So it's great to hear about technologies that are really out there trying to, figure things out for us. So thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, please stay tuned. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. Great stuff. It's now time. It's after Charlene, so it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley, CEO, co-founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell's guests today are CloudTruth CEO Greg Amato and CTO Matt Conway, and they join Mitch to discuss their research into managing the complexity of configuration management across multi-cloud environments. And then Mitch is joined by an old friend of mine, Jason McKee, VP and CTO IBM Cloud Platforms. And Jason, of course, is also an IBM Fellow, which is quite an accomplishment. And Mitch is going to discuss with Jason the recent announcement between IBM and AT&T to collaborate on enterprises using or hosting applications in hybrid cloud environments, both AT&T and IBM's. Mitchell and Jason will tell you more about it. Here now's Mitchell Ashley.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined today by a couple of folks from CloudTruth. First is Greg Arnett, who's co-founder and CEO, and also Matt Conway, who's co-founder and CTO. Greg, welcome. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Mitch.
Have you on. So Greg, as the CEO, you can lead off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about what CloudTruth is, what you guys do.
Sure. And thanks, Mitch. Grateful for the opportunity to talk about our project and share what we're working on. I am co-founder and CEO of the company. My previous background has been a CTO for several different SaaS cloud companies in the past. This is the first time I'll be in the CEO role, and I'm working alongside my friend Matt Conway, who we've known for over a decade, and we're solving a problem around configuration management for cloud native environments, We're taking a look at the challenges that customers face managing configuration complexity as it exists today, and looking a little bit ahead to the future and problems that we anticipate customers will be dealing with. So I think it's an exciting area that needs some attention right now. Configuration management has become kind of a stale discipline, and what we've learned over talking to 200 technology leaders, especially around cloud practitioners, DevOps practitioners, engineering leaders, is that there's an emerging pain point managing all the different dimensions of complexity that are evolving today, especially as customers move towards using Kubernetes and functions as a service alongside of kind of classic host-based architectures. So what we're working on will be offered as a service initially, and then we'll be launching into private beta shortly.
Great, thank you. Matt?
Hi, name's Matthew Conway. Most people just call me Matt, so that's fine. Grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. Came up here, went to college at MIT, and then stuck around. Mostly, been doing sort of serial entrepreneur at various Boston startups over the last 20 years, and I got together with Greg and started to pursue Cloud Truth. So excited to be digging into that.
I can relate to your story. Worked with some fellow entrepreneurs, friends on multiple companies. So if you can keep the friendship, it's a great way to go about it. So I wish you luck on both.
It's definitely key to getting something off the ground, is have that ability to trust and have the rapport, especially since things are pretty volatile in the early days, right? We're establishing product market fit and learning, pivoting, and that's one of the goals that we wanted to achieve with this project, was to bring the voice of customer into the ideation aspect as early as possible, basically to avoid getting a false positive on thinking that we're onto something that customers care about, but then ultimately realizing that maybe we were off the mark. So we have a big investment in research as we are starting to write code to go down this path of offering a new service.
I always describe that initial period for a startup company as the three main questions you're trying to figure out is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's an approach to solve it? And will people pay for it? And that's kind of the simple version of product market fit and the process that you're going for. But if you can't answer those three questions, you might have something you create, but you're not going to be able to make any money at it. And so, especially in an evolving market, that's tough too, when it's not clear that this is what exactly people are looking for. Maybe they're not sure even.
And that's one thing we're cognizant of, is in some aspects what we're working on is fairly leading edge, and it represents thought leadership that Matt has been working on for quite a while in his career around how to manage complicated infrastructure environments in a sort of simple, top-down, elegant way. So we're going to be educating the market on some ideas about what's possible. It reminds me of that famous axiom you hear that's often attributed to Henry Ford. When he was asked about what his customers wanted, he said they really wanted a faster horse. They couldn't conceive of the fact that a concept of an automobile could replace the horse. And in some aspects, what we're doing with Cloud Truth is we're causing a light bulb moment to happen when we describe what we're thinking about and the initial functionality. That's often the response that we get, is that people tell us, oh, I didn't think that was possible, but now that I see this, that opens up a whole new line of thinking about how I might approach configuration management. So there's a leading edge aspect of this. The double-edged sword there is we could be too leading edge and far further away from where the customer has pain point right now. So it's sort of aligning those, the timeline is key. So I think we're actually just in time. I don't think we're going to be the proverbial pioneer that gets the arrows in the back, but rather we're going to be entering the market at the point where the pain is starting to be more acute. And that's I think, sort of the wind in our sails at this point in time.
Yes. Someone once told me the difference between a scout and a pioneer is whether the arrows are in the front or in the back. Not sure if that's a culturally sensitive analogy, but it does at least describe kind of what the challenges you're facing, right, ahead of you. So tell us a little bit about, now are you privately funded through VC, private equity, your own funding? How are you sourcing the company for capital?
Yeah, the funding is a combination of, there's two traditional VCs that represent a majority of the investment, and then we're complemented by some specific angel investors that contributed from their own private funds, and then a couple seed funds invested in us alongside with those VCs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Well, so you're approaching a private beta. Obviously don't have product in market yet. So let's really explore what do you see is the gap in the market? You know, why are you going, what are you going after that others haven't solved or solved in the way you think it should be solved?
Yeah, there's a couple comments that I'd like to kick off with, and then Matt does a great job describing the specifics, because often what we're bringing to market is a distillation of his leading edge thinking around this concept. So we put some guardrails around the project initially in order to find a way to enter the market without having to be sort of a thing where a customer has to fire a tool in order to hire us for the job. We really wanted to be something that would be additive, it could live alongside and coexist with the customer's existing configuration technologies, and still solving a problem that we hear people complain about, which is sort of this lack of ability to get a top-down view of how everything is configured, the ability to have a simple way of understanding how each environment is configured compared to other environments. So there's some specific use cases that we're learning about through these product market fit research interviews. The thing that we're cognizant of is avoiding getting a false positive, making sure that, you know, what we talk about building and creating is genuine feedback versus someone just telling us what we think we want to hear in terms of, oh, that's a great idea. But when it comes down to like, well, would you actually use it or pay for it? Well, maybe not so much, right? So we spend a lot of time sort of pivoting around the concept of really, is there a true problem to solve here? And I think with confidence, we can say definitely, yes, there is. There's probably some nuances about how we enter the market, and that's what we're working on right now. So our private beta is a set of functionality that solves some specific problems today, but becomes the platform and the foundation for us to grow into a full configuration management system over time, which is where we actually ultimately want to end up becoming. But it's hard to go build a platform in the dark without having real customers start to use it as early as possible. So there's a little bit of that tension between enough of the initial functionality to make it viable and show what's possible, and then get customers involved with that cycle, and then grow it beyond the initial features to a full platform. But I think it'd be great for Matt to describe sort of some of the thinking that's been in his mind around why Cloud Truth is needed today, and what sort of customers have been trying to do in the past to solve this problem, and then not solve it very successfully.
Great. Looks like the baton's now in your hands, Matt.
Yeah, so let's see if I can keep this high level without getting too gored up into the details. But you know, basically the problem we're trying to solve is you know, try and reduce some of the complexity with dealing with these large-scale distributed systems that, you know, larger companies have, right? You know, as a company scales up in size, starts using the cloud more, or even just as a large company, they tend to have a lot of distributed pieces, decentralized, decoupled pieces that make up their entire system. And those pieces aren't necessarily all, you know, built using the same technologies. They aren't necessarily all configured the same way on the same clouds, in the same regions, stuff like that. But one thing they all have in common is that, you know, they all do need to be configured, right? They all have a certain set of inputs that drive their behavior. And that behavior can tend to differ across a couple of dimensions. So it can tend to differ across environments. You may configure it in one way for development versus production. And it may differ in you know, another way in terms of region, right? Your US stack may want to behave differently than your European stack, right? And how do you ensure that all of the configuration gets driven to all these pieces in a way that you can still look at the whole system from the top down and get the big picture? So that you can look at it and say, yes, I know my system is functioning correctly, or this is the state of my system at any point in time. And that's basically what we're trying to accomplish. Help you, you know, keep track of all this configuration and help you get it from A to B, so to speak. So, you know, if you're a Terraform shop or partially a Terraform shop, and you have, you know, a lot of this Terraform state that's generated by Terraform, which contains things like your VPC ID or your domain name server ID, things like that. And then you happen to be using a serverless component, you know, over in left field, and it needs some of these resources. You can go and do all the legwork of making sure Terraform puts it in a place that this thing can then access it from. But our approach is a little more decoupling the two so that they can live without having to know about each other, which is typically what you want in a large system. You want things decoupled. But Cloud Truth will end up being able to look at the Terraform state, extract the data you care about, and ensure that it gets over here to your serverless application. So, that's one of the mechanisms we're using to kind of allow you to drive configuration from the top down while still keeping all your pieces nicely decoupled.
History is always a great teacher. If there are multiple paths to the cloud, most organizations will take them, right?
For sure.
So I'm curious, are you taking a roll-up view, kind of a management view of all of this, collecting all the data, or are you also looking to actually manage the configurations in one place, push those back out into those cloud environments?
So a little bit of both. The configurations that we are managing. Where we're starting anyway is we're starting with this concept of this converged unified parameter store. And parameter stores typically have very simple data. It's things like cluster size or port number and things like that. So the data that's in them is usually pretty small, and that's typically the data that's used to drive the configuration of a self-contained component. So we feel that's a good match there. So you can use this as a parameter store to statically set values for things that various parts of your system are going to need. But we are also integrating the ability in this parameter store for parameter themselves to be generated by getting data from other sources. So you can set up a rule in our system that'll say, go to this S3 bucket where my Terraform state file is and pull out the things that match this pattern and ensure a parameter that exists with those values in the parameter store. So this parameter store then becomes this aggregation layer of your configuration across your system. So you could use it either way, right? You could use it as a driver, or you could use it in a read-only mode where you just kind of keep on top of how your whole system is configured without actually using it to drive the configuration of that system. So depending on the customer, we see people coming in on one path and moving to the other, or vice versa. So we're trying to play both of those angles because we think they're both important and valid for the overall solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see taking on an entire enterprise, being the configuration management. I kind of think of the title of your company or name of your company is kind of source of truth, right? Yeah. About the cloud. Is a big sale, is a big lift to put on, and maybe just being able to know what's happening by the 25 different groups doing 26 different things in all the cloud environments, and being able to stay on top of that.
And definitely
it's might be of value.
Yeah, it's the source of truth is somewhat of a misnomer because practically speaking, there is never a single source of truth in an organization. There's always many. So we like to think of ourselves more of the record of truth. So we'll aggregate all these sources of truth and give you an actual realistic record of the truth of your system. Mm-hmm. And then we plan to this configuration database, so to speak, will be fully versioned, and we'll have a bunch of intelligence on top of that, be able to show you, comparisons between environments or other dimensions, be able to alert you when things change that shouldn't change, be able to link the changes of one parameter to another. So if you change X, you need to change Y as well. All of the intelligence you could conceive of that eventually would be valuable on top of a system like this. It's certainly in our on our roadmap, but getting from here to there will take a while, I'm sure.
So one path that this makes me think of, Matt, is, are you looking to tie yourself into the pipeline process in a DevOps kind of scenario where you're part of CIC, primarily CI/CD, for deploying, setting up environments for testing as well as production, mm-hmm. so that those environments can be dynamically created using your product, your technology, as the input to that rather than other sources, scripts, whatever, configuration files, things like that. Is that part of your intention?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of our integration points is certainly CI/CD, right? You need to be able to know the configuration of things and get the credentials of things in order to deploy things, right? But then there's also the applications themselves. Like if you want to be able to have a certain chunk of configuration control the live runtime behavior of an application without having to redeploy, that's another integration point inside the application, so that you can change some parameter which affects the behavior without having to do a full restart, which makes sense for things like feature flags and things like that, or just cache sizes, right? Right. If you notice that your cache is kind of low all the time and you want to try a higher one and see if it fixes the problem, you could do that. And then the other place that could be useful is in infrastructure as code pipelines, right? Being able to feed configuration into that, as well as pull configuration out the back end like we do already.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, and I'm not an expert in this field necessarily, but it seems like that then some of the more dynamic tools like a Kubernetes that's doing container management, managing clusters, configures of that, spinning things up and down, resizing, all of that. That's a pretty dynamic environment. How do you, it's not like, let me log into my configuration management and have it tell Kubernetes what I want. I'm used to working with Kubernetes directly. How do you fit into a scenario like that?
So with Kubernetes, probably it makes the most sense to have a config map plugin of some sort. So be able to plug into the live configuration of Kubernetes, so that whenever parameters change within CloudTruth, they're immediately available within the config map within Kubernetes. So that's one angle of doing it. Another angle is, we have this concept of templates, which basically just a free-form text way to generate a file which contains references to parameters. So you could conceivably generate, Kubernetes YAML files with templates as well, though that would be less dynamic than a config map plugin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where in the pipeline you want to integrate with Kubernetes. If you want to do it at, within the source repositories, you can do it that way, or at CI/CD. If you want to do it at runtime of your cluster itself, then config map probably makes more sense. And then have a way to trigger, restarts or whatever when the config changes and so on.
So I kind of jumped us ahead into kind of how you're solving some of these problems. Let's back up for a moment and
at least thinking of solving this
problem. Why isn't this problem being solved in the market already, or who's partially there but really hasn't grasped the full scope of what you're tackling?
Go ahead,
Greg.
Well, I have a perspective, I think, and Matt will have a perspective. That's an area that we spent a lot of time digging into, especially during our fundraising process. As you can imagine, investors are always interested in the competitive landscape and who's out there doing something like this. So that ties in back to this sort of original thinking concept of what we're creating, and it's a double-edged sword in a way, right? We're trying to show customers what's possible, make sure we're doing something that feels relevant and useful at the same time, and avoid getting that false positive. The thing we learned during our initial research is that DevOps teams of any kind of complexity or scale, so when you get to teams that are more than, say, 20 folks who are working on the software or above, you start to encounter some issues that become friction and dimensions of complexity, like team scale is a dimension of complexity around configuration management that causes this problem to emerge. Too much configuration information is held as tribal knowledge across select individuals, and there's not really a great way to share that because then you're using sort of your Git repos as a place to store config values and YAML and JSON files, but there's not an easy way to kind of look into that from a system perspective to get an understanding how things are configured. And if you're not doing good commenting on PRs, then you're losing the context of why a setting is a setting and why it was changed and that kind of stuff. So we saw dimensions of complexity starting to emerge that felt like there was an opportunity to address this problem in a dedicated way. We encountered many teams that had built sort of a bespoke internal tool to address this issue in a one-off way. And that to us was a signal that if they're willing to invest their precious team time on building an internal tool because they had a pain point, then it's time to offer this as a generalized service that could be widely consumed. So that was an early finding that bolstered our thinking around, yeah, it's time to pull the trigger and go down and create CloudTruth as an offering, given that Matt's built tools internally to do this. My teams have in the past, when I've been managing DevOps groups, have built internal tools to do some aspect of this. And those tools end up becoming a drag on productivity, No one wants to maintain them over time. The original stakeholders that created the tool will probably cycle out of the company or the project, and you lose that knowledge that was valuable in the original time period of when that tool was created. So it creates a number of issues. We've heard from customer prospects that there's a concept of doing an archaeological dig through all the layers of cloud tooling that start to emerge in a company or a project that's got 3+ years of kind of active usage. And so that becomes a daunting task of understanding how everything is wired up, which tools are really being used, which tools are we afraid to pull out because we don't know the dependencies or how they're interacting with other systems. So those are some themes that we want to address with Cloud Truth to be able to do kind of blast radius detection of how changes could affect the system, dependency analysis of configuration settings across multiple parts of the system become possible by having this configuration management data lake concept as a centralized repository. That's just a couple perspectives that would be worth sharing at this point.
Great. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about roadmap, but before we do, I'm real curious, what did you learn in your research talking to prospective customers? People are in this domain, may have this kind of a problem. What did you learn that you were most surprised about or didn't expect to learn? And I'm talking beyond the obvious of there's not a solution for this or whatever. What did you hear from? Because oftentimes you hear from people you're doing research with of, okay, I have a truly different appreciation for what's happening and why.
Yeah, I can summarize some concepts, and Matt will have an opinion about this as well. We've been really good at recording all of our interviews and having transcripts and use it as a knowledge base that we look back into as we want to make further decisions to remind ourselves, what did we learn from that particular customer interaction? So we've done over 200 of these at this point. So it's quite an extensive knowledge base of lessons learned, so to speak. Some things that come to mind around sort of surprises is one aspect of the pain point that we're addressing seems to be more acute when the DevOps functionality is taking the embedded approach as opposed to being sort of DevOps is run and managed as a silo that is alongside mainline software development. So we often encounter those two different constructs of team organization and management. When DevOps is a centralized function that is managed by a strong leader, there tends to be consistent decision-making around the tools and strategies that are going to be used for configuration management. So they tend to be in better shape, but they still experience the problem that we're addressing. But more acutely, team environments where the DevOps function or that role is an embed in all the different teams that are working on, say, microservices or specific applications, and they often have a decentralized approach to decision-making, they're experiencing more pain right now because different teams chose different strategies for managing secrets or different strategies or tools for managing configuration settings. But yet the VPs of engineering, the CTOs, the CISOs have that need for having kind of the top-down view. And that's something that we can address with what we're working on with Cloud Truth. So that was one of the surprising learnings that I took away from it. It also gave us good insights on how to prospect for potential new customers by asking some high-level questions around how is your team organized? How are they making decisions around DevOps strategies? Because we can then fine-tune our outreach towards the ones that have the embedded approach.
Great. Matt, any surprises? Didn't expect to find this as you did your research?
Sorry, my printer just went off. I guess my daughter's printing something for school.
No worries.
Let me wait for that to finish before answering. But in effect, no. And I agree with Greg. That was the biggest surprise to me as well. Both layouts tend to still have the need for what we're building, but it was much more pressing a need with the sort of the decentralized team, simply because the lines of communication are never as good between teams as you'd like them to be. So Cloud Truth could sort of help accentuate that communication barrier, at least for that distributed team scenario. And for the centralized team, right? They end up building this tool anyway, so why build it if they can just use it, right?
Yeah, some of the other things we learned, are that there are other stakeholders in the organization that crave access to this information, like QA groups, SRE groups that live alongside of the DevOps functionality. And right now, they don't really have a great way to introspect the data, even in a read-only capacity. So we think that there's something there to solve with what we're working on with using good RBAC policies to allow other stakeholders have a login that would give them a slice of the sort of config management tree in an appropriate way. So that becomes more of a self-service. CISOs, SecOps, compliance audit folks need to keep track of how configuration changes are occurring, when they changed, who changed them, why they changed, for their reports, for their SOC 2 reports, for their FedRAMP reports. We provide an aggregation of a data stream that right now is hard to compile for them. So there's another area that we can focus on down the road. But right now we're trying to limit our surface detail in terms of how much we're trying to bite off right now in terms of a problem to solve, to get very laser focused. That will become our wedge into the market. And then we can expand and use that wedge as a beachhead to go and solve other problems where we're uniquely qualified with the amount of data that we're managing and the intelligence that we can bring to that data.
Great. Well, let's wrap things up. Just talking a little bit about your product roadmap. You said you're in private beta right now, heading towards a public beta, correct? Timing on that?
The private beta will probably run for a couple months. We have a close group of interested parties that really bought into the vision. They're able to deal with the early aspects of a service where not all the table stakes are available on day one, as we'll continue to flesh those out. No one buys us for table stakes. They buy us for our functionality, but not having certain table stakes like a SOC 2 audit or a great strategy on how we're going to manage secrets out of the get-go will prohibit them from using it in production, but they can use it in their test dev, evaluation environments. And that's the feedback that we need right now. So directionally, we just went from sort of the 30,000 foot view where we're going to fine tune which problem to solve. Now we're down to like 10,000 feet, and then we're going to kind of set ourselves up for touchdown with the launch of a public beta that would represent a full set of functionality to solve a specific set of use cases, mostly around AWS, Terraform, SSM parameter store use cases, and as well as Git repos as sources of individual sources of truth that can tie into that single record of truth concept.
Okay, great. Well, how do folks that might be interested in sharing with you their views on your research or being part of one of your betas, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best place to go is cloudtruth.com. We have an ability for people to indicate their interest. We're actively reaching out to folks who are in the either DevOps leaders or DevOps practitioners for our survey. And through that process, we identify folks that are probably appropriate for getting into the private beta.
Great. Well, wish you both the best of luck. It's an exciting time in the stage of your company. Having been there a few times myself, I enjoy observing the process you're going through because I know how exciting and how rapid the learning is and creating a product. So
every day is something else. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch.
It's my pleasure having Matt Conway, co-founder and CTO, and Greg Arnett, co-founder and CEO of CloudTruth. Be sure and check them out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm pleased today to be joined by Jason McGee, who is VP and CTO of IBM Cloud Platform. He's also a IBM Fellow. Welcome, Jason. Good to be talking with you.
Yeah, great to be here.
I know we have some exciting news. Before we get to that, just tell folks a little bit about yourself. I know being an IBM Fellow, you must have done some distinguishing things. Love to hear about a little bit of your history.
Sure. So, my current role is I run platform for IBM Cloud. So I kind of take care of all things in the cloud native space, our Kubernetes and OpenShift and serverless and kind of observability capabilities. I have a long history in kind of application middleware space. I originally was the chief architect for WebSphere App Server and have been kind of playing in the platform game as it's evolved over the last 20 years for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, great. I know you have some really exciting news about IBM and the cloud, your cloud platform business, working with some telco activities. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So as hopefully many people are aware, IBM has a strong cloud strategy that's been centered around hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environments. And one of the kind of variations of hybrid cloud, if you will, is the emergence of edge computing and the rise of 5G. And we think there's a lot of really interesting scenarios emerging where customers are trying to combine the performance and latency that 5G networking gives with the ease of use and consumption of public cloud to enable them to build a new class of applications at the edge. We made an announcement last week with about an expanded partnership between IBM and AT&T to bring together kind of two key pieces. Some capabilities that AT&T has around their metro or their edge platform for 5G, so they can bring 5G connectivity into a customer site, into a factory or distribution center, into a corporate office. So we're combining that kind of 5G network capability with something called IBM Cloud Satellite, which is a new capability we're building in IBM Cloud that lets us take our public cloud and distribute it to on-prem environments, to the edge environment, and to other public clouds. And so customers can kind of get the best of both in one unified offering.
Across the barrier of that private boundary and essentially bringing that cloud into your site on-prem, that kind of a strategy.
Right. And I think it's part of a bigger evolution that we see happening with cloud computing in general, that, cloud computing started with cloud services in a cloud region or data center. So it was about moving workload into the cloud. Cloud has become a model for how you consume IT and how you build applications. And that kind of consumption model is now expanding back out to a more flexible set of locations. So you can kind of keep the public cloud experience, but physically run it, in your factory, in your distribution center, in your store, at your on-prem data center, and across multiple clouds. And that's what this is really about, kind of enabling those two things.
So with distributing to the edge using 5G, I imagine it's about speed and latency or some of the advantages you're wanting to gain with working with IBM and AT&T. Are there certain kinds of applications you think are more conducive to an edge computing on-prem cloud strategy like this?
Yeah, I do. I think we're seeing a number of interesting examples. Like one example we've been working with another company on was doing safety-related video analytics. So like they actually is interesting. They had started building an application to do video analytics to look for things like, were people wearing hard hats in a construction zone? Take something like that. And so they wanted to be able to like look at all this camera data, do processing and AI, detect whether people were wearing their safety gear and alert them if they weren't, so they could make the environment more safe. With COVID in 2020, like that has now shifted to a related scenario, which is, where are people congregating in a building? Because we might need additional cleaning in that location because there was a lot of people that were congregating there. And if you think about a scenario like that, piping all that data back to the cloud could be really very expensive. So it's much more efficient if you can do all that video processing locally where on site, and therefore you get lower latency and better performance and lower costs, frankly, because you're not shuttling all this data back. The challenge, so that's a good example of a case where it's like running at the edge makes sense. But you still are building an application that's doing AI processing and alerting, and like, how do you actually run that? And historically, to do these edge scenarios, you needed to stand up infrastructure in that site, run that hardware, stand up software, manage the software. So there's a big kind of management task. with things like satellite, what we can do is like, we can just like run all that for you as the cloud service. So you can just log into the cloud and say like provision an app in my building, and we'll kind of run all that for you. And so you're getting kind of the 5G network performance to enable the connectivity, and you're getting the as a service value of the cloud to address some of these new scenarios. Make sense?
Really, video makes a lot of sense. Something that's highly intensive.
And we're seeing it with like factories, with like robotics in factories. We're seeing it in offline scenarios. Like we have another customer who's in global shipping, and so you can imagine they have shipping ports all over the world, and like those ports need to stay up no matter what. So like if the network goes down to the cloud, it's not acceptable to shut the port down, and so having like local processing is really useful in those cases.
Interesting. It's great. It's great to see some cool things happening with 5G as it gets rolled out and enabling real applications. I think sometimes folks struggle with what is edge computing? Why is that important when we have all these resources in the cloud? And it sort of kind of harkens back to that same, are we always going to have on-prem data centers too, right? There's reasons why things need to be local.
Yeah, I think a lot of the scenarios we're seeing for that come down to latency, data volume, IoT, like the robotics factory thing is a good example of like IoT. It's like, there's a lot of sensors, there's a lot of data being generated. Like you need to be able to do some local processing on that data. You can't send the fire hose of data all back to the cloud and do it there. So there's a need to kind of stay closer to the source. That's what I think edge is ultimately about, is like places where you need to stay closer to the data source. And 5G provides a way to have that latency and performance on the network. I think 5G really comes into its own with these kind of enterprise use cases, right? Like I don't need to necessarily like stream YouTube on my phone faster, but if I'm a company, I really need to like process data faster. And then distributed cloud, which is what satellite's about, fills in the rest of the puzzle. And so that partnership is like, hey, AT&T and IBM, how can we work together to have a unified offering that allows people to actually run applications at the edge and take advantage of 5G?
If you think about industrial IoT kinds of, any type of sensor device, whether it's a, automated car, offer automated driving, or a factory device, once they're truly an industrial IoT type of device, they're generating huge amounts of data. I mean, it's sort of data sensors are the new hard drives, right? We'll generate as much data as the bandwidth will consume, or the hard drive has access for, has capacity for. And that's kind of this era of, now what do you do with all of that? What really needs to be shipped to the cloud? What can be benefit from? Maybe you're doing some AI routines or algorithms locally within the factory environment or the enterprise environment. So if you think about it in that context, I mean, they're talking about automobiles generating, multiple gigs of data per day, just connected to the cloud. And does that all really need to go back? Kind of same thing. And think about the massive industrial, or as you mentioned, the shipping, the port example, right? There's a lot of information, just all the data being downloaded from a tanker that's come in, or a shipping engineer. All of that seems like a great fit for this kind of application.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we've also kind of focused on data processing capabilities. So like we're bringing our data analytics and AI capabilities into this environment. Like we're bringing in our kind of edge application management, because the other interesting dimension of edge, which kind of plays into the announcement that we made, is that you also wind up with a lot more places potentially where you're running applications, right? Like, you don't have your 2 data centers or your 3 cloud regions. Like now maybe you have, 100 factories or 200 distribution centers. Like you just wind up with a lot more diversity of kind of physically where you're running, and therefore you need new management capabilities. So we're bringing in things like our edge application management functionality into this picture, so we can give customers the tools they need to like not only run it locally, but run lots of instances of those things at scale and be able to manage it easily.
One thing that seems like this could be an extremely good timing for is typically during economic downtimes, supply chains get disrupted. Companies are not the same when they go back to rebuild their supply chain, or maybe they pick a different strategy. And given the global nature of IBM and AT&T's network and edge computing, that might be a really good kind of tool for architects to have in their belt to say, let's rethink how we build this supply chain and how this data flows and where.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's really interesting, and it's one of the things that we've seen this year. With the disruption caused by the pandemic, is like it's really accelerated people's adoption of cloud computing, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, but like it in general has kind of increased people's timelines or sped up their timelines around cloud adoption. And I think ideas like satellite, which let us take that public cloud model and push it into these other places, is really useful, because like maybe you can't get out of the data center really quickly, but you can bring the cloud into the data center and get some of the agility and development benefit, offload some of the operational responsibility while leaving the data where it is, so that later, maybe next year, you can actually physically move it out. So we're starting to see kind of distributed cloud as a tool to support that accelerated adoption that we're seeing because of all the changes around us.
Are there also the capital, the economic benefits of bringing cloud into that environment that way, as opposed to maintaining your current on-prem infrastructure, or considering the cost of moving everything outside of the data center?
Yeah, there could be. Sometimes I see it happening in a way that, like, we're bringing infrastructure in with those stories. So like it's a different way to get infrastructure. So I'm also seeing that, maybe you're using the infrastructure you have. So like your capital for the infrastructure is the same, but you're getting much more efficient utilization out of that infrastructure, because you're able to kind of pool it, treat it like a cloud style resource pool. It's less broken up into kind of hard defined boundaries. And so you can kind of use what you have more efficiently. And you're consuming it differently, so that like as you transition, that you can decommission stuff more easily, you can bring hardware out of the pool more easily. So it definitely has an impact there. But I wouldn't say that the primary motivator is kind of capital or operational cost savings. I think the primary motivator seems to be kind of speed and agility,
capability, speed and agility,
and being able to kind of solve some of these problems. Right?
If you put your kind of futurist hat on for a moment, sometimes changing the paradigm, changing the dynamics of technology and what we can do with it, cloud's a great example of that. If you think forward a couple of years, 2-3 years down the road, maybe farther, how much do you think this edge computing model, the satellite model, will transform? Will it be a kind of additional adjunct capability to what we do? Or do you think we're going to start rethinking how we build applications, how we create infrastructure, and it sort of turns on itself and the edge becomes the thing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would make two comments. One, at least in my history in IT, we don't tend to land on the extremes. Like things don't tend to switch from all one way to all the other way.
Even though we say it's going to, right?
Even though we say it's going to, at least over longer time scales. I think with things like edge, like my view is that we're on a path to create like a continuum where the boundaries between those things are not as obvious. Like today we talk about edge computing as different than cloud computing, like they're distinct things. But like, I don't actually think that's the path we're on. And I think there's probably two primary drivers to those coming together in a more transparent way where customers can kind of just deploy wherever they need. One driver is things like Kubernetes and OpenShift. So like we're on a common technical platform that allows you to build applications in a common way and operate them in a common way, no matter where they run. Right. So that's kind of like 20 years ago, that was the Java, like write once, run anywhere kind of value prop, right? Like we have a little bit of, like Kubernetes and OpenShift are kind of playing that role today in a more flexible way, but fundamentally
the larger part of the stack, right?
Right. You could do more things more flexibly, but ultimately what they give you is a way to have a consistent model everywhere. And then the other driver is I think this kind of distributed computing or distributed cloud notion where you're taking the as a service kind of centralized control plane of public cloud, and you're making it diverse enough to manage anywhere. And so you get both the SaaS value prop of, the as a service value prop, and you get the common platform. You bring those two things together and apply them to edge, to devices, to the core, to the data center. And pretty soon, like it just looks like one continuum where you can run the workload wherever it makes sense. You can move things around. And then edge just becomes like, design consideration. Like this application probably needs to run closer to this data, and it doesn't become like a completely different stack that you're thinking about.
kind of having to re-architect things. Good, good. So the relationship with AT&T, do customers come to IBM to sort of get everything, or is it just making it easier to work with both companies, whether you're now a customer of IBM's or AT&T or both?
Yeah, so we're still working some of that out. So some of the details are still in flight. The announcement was kind of about expanding our partnership to go solve this space. The vision is that we would go to market with a single offering. So like you could get a single integrated offering that could be infrastructure to run your applications on, the AT&T 5G equipment in the site to do the connectivity, all pre-enabled with satellite and connected back to IBM Cloud. So like we can go into a manufacturer, into a hospital, and like land this stack essentially, and then that becomes a location of IBM Cloud with the AT&T network providing the backhaul over 5G, and now you can start to deploy solutions and applications and manage them all centrally. So the idea is that it'll be an integrated offering, not just like a reference architecture that you put together yourself.
Almost like and this may be the wrong analogy, but sort of the pod analogy. Here you go, put this here. You've got everything from the network through the software stack.
Right, the whole thing plugged in, connected back. Connectivity figured out for you, management figured out for you, and you can very quickly be up and running with some application that you need to host in that environment.
Great, excellent. Well, congratulations on the announcement. I know you have an even more recent kind of extending this idea, an additional announcement.
Yeah, so I think that the work we're doing with AT&T that we talked about last week is you can kind of put it in context with the bigger IBM strategy. Like one of the things we're really focused on in IBM Cloud is kind of industry alignment and really building a cloud that's optimized for particular industries. You saw that last year with the announcement we made around financial services cloud with AT&T or with Bank of America, and kind of building a unique set of capabilities for financial services. Tomorrow, we're going to make an announcement around a telco cloud capability with IBM Cloud. So we're partnering with Samsung and Nokia and others to build an optimized set of solutions around telco. The AT&T satellite thing is kind of a feeder into that. We're working with many other telcos around the world and really trying to figure out how do we build optimized capabilities to both help the telcos move to 5G and modernize their 5G core, and like Red Hat Linux and OpenShift play a big role in that. And then also using things like satellite in those telcos to do the same kinds of things, like to give them a diverse kind of agile cloud platform that can leverage that 5G technology for customer benefit.
Cool. Is this focused around a particular area of offering, like wireless, video, voice, data, or is it the sort of the multi package of services that telcos would offer?
Yeah, it's multifaceted. It's more broadly targeted at the collection of kind of telco use cases. I would put them into those two big camps, like modernization, 5G modernization of the telco core itself, and using that 5G telco capabilities to target the enterprise, right? And so it's both of those. But if you think about telco, like there's a lot of unique requirements, there's stringent availability requirements, there's a lot of locality matters a lot with telcos. So like, the AT&T announcement I described was really about putting 5G into the customer's sites. But you can also imagine like metro area 5G scenarios where like the telcos have capacity in a city. How do you get some cloud into that as well? So, it's a big space, obviously. And the
a lot of physical considerations, really density, and
the bigger space.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, it's interesting too. It seems like an evolution from my work with telcos was largely of the let's virtualize everything right at the edge, down all the way to the edge. Now it's taking a much bigger step of let's add to that the whole cloud capacity computing, all of that capability stacked on top of what might be a normal telco virtualized stack of 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. Like both are happening. Like virtualization of the telco stack itself is absolutely, happening around 5G deployments, and we're working as part of these announcements to enable and support those. And then like I alluded to, I think 5G itself is really being driven by more of these kind of enterprise and application scenarios. It's more I think, more kind of enterprise driven than consumer driven in a lot of ways. And therefore, the cloud angle becomes more important because it's like, well, how do I build applications around this? And how do I do data processing and stream processing? And how do I do AI? And like, those are all the things you're trying to do with the data over 5G. So we want a tighter link there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, good. Congratulations on that announcement too. That's exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. What's the best place for folks to learn more about both the AT&T activity as well as the new telco cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there'll be a bunch of blogs and articles about it. I think for the AT&T and satellite thing, you can go to ibm.com/cloud/satellite. That's a good landing place for finding out more about what we're doing there.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun talking with you about it. It's good to talk about the infrastructure stack and get into telco a little bit. I haven't done that for a while. So yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Jason.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for joining us. Jason McGee, who's VP and CTO of the IBM Cloud Platform and IBM Fellow.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Okay, wow. Great show for a Monday. What a way to kickstart this week, huh? Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you to all our guests. Thank you to Tricentis for sponsoring DevOps Unbound. We will be back tomorrow with more fresh content. I think we have a new CISO Talk episode to look forward to. I hope to see you then. Until then, though, be safe, be well, be strong, tech strong. Be careful out there, guys. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.